I guess first of all, could you just talk a little bit about what your new book is going to be about?
Okay, well, my new book is going to be about basically the role of Eve in the Bible, and which is also the role of women in the Bible, basically, since she's the first woman, so she represents all women, basically. Um, so it's actually a pretty deep concept that I don't think a lot of people grasp. There's feminists do grasp it on the left for sure. I mean, it's not true that nobody's talking about this. There's lots of people talking about it, but there's some element of subversion in that subject going on right now and for a while. So we can't just ignore it. See, that's the thing. One of the things that's been going on is that people who have the intention of defending tradition and the church and um, have a tendency of ignoring what's going on that side of the political aisle, let's say, on the left. So it's like just ignoring it or just saying it's wacko, just saying it's crazy. It doesn't make any sense, which is not true. It does make sense. It makes plenty of sense. Now that doesn't mean you have to uh, go into that completely. Okay, so that's the problem. Is it's usually the same with all problems. Is you see part of a big picture, you see just part of it, and then you instead of putting it where it belongs in the place where it belongs in the universe, you just you see it as the whole picture. So that's usually what causes most problems in this world is somebody perceives some truth and then they they kind of fall in love with that part of reality and they sort of attribute everything to that part. So but that happens on both sides, though. That's the thing. You see, it happens on both sides. It's not necessarily always about politics. I mean, it goes into politics in the end. It ends up in politics, and it ends up in morality too, and it ends up everywhere. But these are just symptoms of beliefs, of perspectives that people adopt. So there's truth to the feminist worldview. It's not completely false, but it's also not completely true what certain right wingers tend to go towards. It also has sometimes the same problem. Uh, if you see your right wing leaning perspective as being the whole thing, and the other side is being completely wrong, um, it's the same error on both sides in a sense. I'm not trying to be a centrist here. In fact, I'm not at all a centrist. It kind of bugs me sometimes people think the solution is always just to kind of sneak yourself in the middle there and always just I don't even know how to describe it. I don't like that. Um, but you don't have to be a centrist to see that both sides have some reason for existing. Okay, and with the left, there's a huge issue because, well, from what I'm seeing now, when I'm studying, that side is very subtle. Okay, so it's a kind of well, I've talked about this before. It's the I think I said like then the good stumbling stone, right? I think that's how I described it, and that is a good way to describe it. So there's a stumbling stone that kills you. But we have to remember that too, there's a stumbling stone that completely destroys you. And your enemy also puts stumbling stones on your path. It's not just obviously, this is the part that everyone should already know intuitively because, we all have enemies. We all have obstacles that are truly meant to stop us and to stop us from doing what we want to do. I mean, your enemy it doesn't just don't necessarily have to see it as evil, good and evil or anything like that. I mean, you have competition, you have different interests, and if your interest goes against another person's interest, then they're against you. They're your enemy. You don't have to start saying this guy is evil and I'm good. It's sometimes it can be that, but I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a naive, almost childish worldview there. I mean, I have enemies and I'm their enemy too. They're my enemy. I'm their enemy. It's not like just a one-sided thing, but you have to be in the reality that we have enemies that want to destroy us as well, obviously. But there's also another aspect to it, which is what I've talked about. I think the last time we spoke, I mentioned a little the idea that sometimes the stumbling stones are good, and sometimes they are there to help you when you're already going astray. So let's say if you're making some errors, you already made some errors, or maybe even before you make errors, you're going into a path of error, and then someone puts a stumbling stone before you so that you don't go in that direction. Okay. So a big part of what Eve represents is that good stumbling stone. And almost every female character in the Bible is actually an embodiment of that. But it's not always obvious at first glance. This is something it took me a long time to kind of figure out all the different ways in which you can represent that, like that pattern. It's a big pattern. It's not like a small thing. It's about half the Bible is about that. So it's not like a small obscure thing that I'm trying to understand here. It's half our lives, really, and that's also why it embodies itself into about half the population when it becomes a political movement, because it's not something you could just ignore. It's not something you could just say, oh, this is evil and we got to destroy it or something like that. And same thing on the other side. I mean, obviously. But it also doesn't mean we have to go wholeheartedly into that direction all the time. Obviously, like I said before, it could be a trap. It often is a trap. So it's like we need caution. We need to understand. And this is why I'm doing this, because we have to have the discernment to know what is a good stumbling stone and what is a bad what is truly a adversarial attack, And so in order to do that, you have to really understand this pattern, and it creates an entire language. This is what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm going to call my book yet. But right now in my mind, I'm calling it kind of to mirror my first book. I'm calling it The Language of Renewal. Okay. So the first one is the language of creation. This one is the language of renewal. So, but I'm not necessarily going to call my book that. This is what my working title is, or my concept is. So I've been doing this for a long time now, years actually. I started, it's about 5-6 years even. I've started doing this, but I got to be honest, it's only recently that I've had some breakthroughs. I had this winter, I had some major struggles. And that kind of taught me a lot of lessons about what I was trying to understand. There's some things sometimes you only understand when you're in suffering, It's like there's this thing you can't understand, and then the only way to understand it is through a kind of suffering, because the reason you don't understand it in the first place is because you neglect it, or you ignore it, or it's completely outside of your sphere of what you're interested in or what you're looking at. And then, so obviously, when it's a situation like that, then the only time you can see these things is when you're in pain because of the fact that you ignored it, and it kind of attacks you. It's actually a microcosm of what's happening to our society right now, actually, I think, in a sense. So certain things have been ignored in the past, as if they were just evil, just evil. So when you do that, this is what happens. At one point, this thing that you're ignoring and that you shouldn't completely ignore because it's part of reality, this thing is going to come and really bite you, until you're almost in the submission mode, you're almost in like desperate mode, that where you have to acknowledge this thing. This kind of happened to me this winter. So this winter I understood a lot of things. And recently is when I really started to have a huge breakthroughs with this what I was trying to understand, because I realized at one point, I don't know exactly what made me realize it, but I think I had maybe a few dreams. And in my dreams, I saw there were some patterns that were related to what was happening to me in real life. And then I realized that what I was looking for was already existed. So it's like I'm trying to not create, but rediscover this thing I was calling the language of renewal. And then I realized that's what dreams are. So it's like it already exists what I'm looking for, this language. It's called dreams. So the dreams express themselves in this language that I'm trying to learn or trying to rediscover. So it seems obvious to me now, you know. Once you find it's often like that. Once you find something, it's like you find it's obvious. I don't know why I didn't see it before, because when we sleep is when we get renewed. So it's an obvious thing now to me now. So this dreaming is the expression of what's going on during the renewal. So it's like a language that talks about what's happening during this renewal process. So it's the language of renewal. I wish I would have realized this a long time ago, but maybe I had to understand a few things before that. So that's what I'm doing now. So I had my own dreams. I started writing my dreams down, which is something I didn't do before. There's a few dreams that I remember from childhood, but that were really, I guess, memorable to me, But I had a few, maybe one or two. But then this is when I started writing my dreams down, and then I started definitely seeing some patterns there. I kind of already knew some of it because I wrote it in my first book. I wrote a chapter about dreams, and I already understood the basic general concept, but there's a lot to talk about. I had a glimpse of it when I wrote my book, but now I'm going to specialize what I'm talking about with this. So then I realized I had to ask people for dreams because I started having doubts about what I was doing, because I was saying, because I really understood my own dreams at that point. It took me a while. It took me about a year, though, to really understand what my dreams were about. And then I started having doubts, about is it just my dreams? Is it just me that have these dreams that are expressing these things? So I had to ask around, I asked a few people I know for dreams, and they gave me dreams, and I caught a few, and it completely fit what I was doing. I understood the dreams. This is the thing I have to say too. Dreams is something you don't usually understand right away. So there's something about it. Even there's so much something about this. What I'm saying here is that if someone tells me a dream verbally, I have trouble listening to it. Like, I listen to it, but my mind doesn't register for some reason. Now I have this experience many times. That's why I could describe it, but I almost always have to ask the person 3, maybe 4 times to tell the dream again, because my mind doesn't listen. It's like the person is telling me their dream, and I think I'm listening, and then I realized that I missed some of it because my mind doesn't want to hear it. It's a strange thing. I don't know exactly why it's like that, but now I've learned to. Now that I've been doing this for a few years, I'm able to listen right away. Still a little bit hard, but now I think I really figured out what I was looking for, because now when I see a dream, I know immediately. I see it immediately what it's about. But it took me a really long time, and I asked on Twitter for some dreams at one point, and that was really when it started unfolding. Everything started unfolding, because then I had like about maybe 300 dreams to work with. And this is really helpful for me because I could compare different dreams. And that was really a real breakthrough for me, because sometimes the dream, you don't understand what it means at first, but then whoops, you see another one and you're like, oh, these two are clearly, they're not the same, but they're following the same pattern for some reason. And you don't quite know what it is. But then once you have at least 2, it creates something in your mind. Like, you see a pattern, even though you don't understand all the parts of it. And then maybe you see a third one and a fourth one. And then you start to see that this is not arbitrary, it's following a certain pattern. So this was really helpful for me. So basically, I've been spending the last months just cycling through these 300 dreams, like just cycling through them every time, finding new things, Also, part of the process was to summarize the dreams. So I had to summarize them because there's lots of details, like everything, there's details that you don't necessarily want to put to memory or try to understand. So I summarize. I try to make about one sentence for a dream, but I still keep the detailed versions, obviously. But for my memory, it's good too, because now I almost know them by heart, just a sentence that describes each one. So that was helpful too. So I did this work for a long time now, and just recently I really had some major breakthroughs, and now I think I'm done. Like, I think I figured out everything I needed to understand. Of course, there's still things that I could understand, but I understand them. Everything that's not a detail, let's say it like that. I understand the pattern. So that's what I've been doing. Now, I mean, we could talk about it, but we'll see. So yeah, that's what I'm answering your question basically, because I don't want to give away what I've been working on for so long, just give it away like that. So I'm kind of being careful. I don't want to talk too much, but I could still talk about it. So
Um, can you just give an overview of what the feminine and masculine are?
okay, what they are. Okay. Well, right now I'm studying. I'm not really studying feminine as a whole. I'm studying a
Okay.
certain aspect, okay? But because the other aspect is not hard to understand. So that's like, I'm gonna start talking like a feminist here, but there's a male-centric, male-centric definition of male, and there's a male-centric definition of female. And then you can say there's a female-centric definition of female and a female-centric definition of male. You could see it like that, because I think it's correct to see it like that. I don't think it's an exaggeration, but because I can tell you what you are, right? But it's not always pleasant to have someone else tell us what we are. It's fine to accept some of that. You can tell me what I am a little bit, but you don't go too far, because I'm allowed to exist on my own. I'm also allowed to define myself in a way. It doesn't have to be extremes. It doesn't have to be I either let you define me completely or I define myself completely. It's ridiculous. It's two things. Some of it is someone imposing meaning on me, and some of it is me trying to make my own meaning. So that's kind of what happens here. So I mean, I talked about this in my book. I can repeat it. In one sense, it's the male perspective. I think I described it as imposing meaning on nature. Or we can replace nature by just reality, basically. It doesn't have to be nature, but nature is what's there already before we intervene in it. So it's okay to say nature too, because it includes everything then. But so imposing meaning on nature, and this is why Adam names the animals. That's what it means. It's pretty obvious once you start understanding these things. So in that sense, we could say that the male is responsible for civilization, okay? In that sense, in the sense that that's what civilization is, imposing meaning on reality. And also what we can say that work, the concept of just work goes with the masculine side, okay? Because that's what work is. Work is imposing your will upon reality and making something out of what's there from your plan that you have, from your idea. So that's the masculine. That's how I understand it. I think that's what it is in the Bible. But it's more complicated than that, because, see, well, we can get to that later, but that doesn't mean every man in the Bible fits that definition, because of what I said before. Some men that are masculine still in the Bible, that are male, are working for Eve. Let's say it like that. They're They're doing the job of Eve. Like they're male feminists, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing. See, that's the thing. Right wingers should be careful. If there's things in reality that if you ignore, they're gonna come and attack you. You have to not fall for the whole thing, but not reject the whole thing either. Okay. So an example of a male feminist, I'm gonna start saying that ironically, but it's Joseph. Okay. Joseph is an example. He's he's male, obviously. It's Joseph. He's not a woman, but he does the pattern of what Eve does. Like he's a messenger of that pattern. He's embodying that pattern. So that's what I was saying before. So you just have to understand that male as male, and then male as working for Eve. So that's how you do it. And then you could do the opposite too. You could say someone could be female and working for Adam, in the sense that she is doing this job of imposing meaning on reality, or letting meaning being imposed, participating in that you're working for Adam. We can say it like that. I'm making these terms up here because I don't know what else to say. But in the female side, if we look at the perspective of Eve, and this is what I'm working on, that aspect. So I'm disguising myself as a left winger, basically. I kind of am in a way. I mean, look at me. I look like a hippie, so I'm not completely in foreign territory, but I don't want the fight. See, I don't want the left and the right to be fighting. We're supposed to be a couple, left and right is a couple. It's not supposed to be mortal enemies, like two countries against each other. That's a different story. It's supposed to be men and women go together. So it's obvious what I'm saying here, but we're being attacked right now, so we have to restate obvious things, right? So the female role, that is on her own, that is her own thing that she does, not when she's listening to Adam, is called the renewal. Okay. We could call it something else, but that's what I'm calling it because I don't know what else to call it. So it's death and renewal. Okay. So that's the role of Eve. So it's related to sleep. So Adam's related to work, which is imposing meaning on reality, having a plan, and then building things up towards that plan. So it's symbolized by a pyramid, something standing, right? Because that's what you do when you accumulate things toward a goal. You make them serve the goal. You're building a pyramid, basically. So, and the other one is related to sleep. So falling asleep is what Eve represents. Okay, that's her job. Okay, but so see, when it says down with things like feminist stuff, like down with the patriarchy and things like that. Okay, down with the patriarchy. That's what happens when I fall asleep every day, down with the patriarchy. So what? It's not even a metaphor here. This is, when I'm standing up during the day and I'm working, that's the patriarchy. Right? That's my mind imposing on my body what to do. You do this. My body is like, okay, doesn't really have a choice, right? But it has somewhat of a choice. It's not true. But then what happens every night, my mind kind of loses. I go crazy, I start get a little bit confused about things, depending on how late it is. And I lose focus. My body becomes weak. It's almost a sickness, right? It's like a sickness. Being tired is a sickness. And I think I'm going to talk about this in my book in detail, but it's the prototype of being sick. Okay. You get sick when you fall asleep, basically. It's like you're intoxicated, you're poisoned. So I'm not like a doctor, obviously, or anything like that, but I think that that's literally what it is when we fall asleep. There must be some kind of toxin inside our body that's released. Maybe they don't call it a toxin. Maybe if this exists in the medical world, I don't really know, because I'm not really interested in these things. I'm interested in healing, but not necessarily the way it's done today by modern science. But they probably don't call it a toxin, this substance that makes you fall asleep. But I see it as a toxin. It's like you're stuck, you're bitten by a snake inside your body. Okay. And then it's like you're intoxicated, Yeah, you lose your vision, you lose your orientation, you lose your sense of time, you lose consciousness. You're paralyzed. It's like you're dead. It's like you've been bitten by a snake or a scorpion, right? So this is the role of Eve to do this thing right here. It's very strange because it looks like it's an enemy, right? I get, I'm working all day, making everything work, making everything follow my will, like this thing goes here, I'm building something, this thing goes here. I'm telling material reality where it's going to go, what it's going to do, including my body. I'm telling my body, my hand, I'm telling my hand, grab this spring, put it there, And then, but this thing has a limit. At one point, I get tired, I fall asleep, and I'm defenseless and paralyzed, And then I go into this illusory world. See, I fall into myself, and then I'm trapped into a world of isolation, okay? Darkness and isolation. And then what happens? My eyes open, but it's like inner eyes, right? Eyes that are looking inward. And then I'm in this other world of illusions. It's like a temporary world, right? Because things don't accumulate in that world. When I work, I get up the next morning, my stuff that I did is still there. That in that sense, it's a world of accumulation. That's why it's a pyramid too. Things don't just disappear. It's a world of relative permanence, right? But then the sleep world is a world of relative impermanence. So you can have recurring dreams, but every time it starts over. It's things that you do in the dream world, and then when you wake up, it's completely gone, and you're probably not going to see that again in a dream. So it's a world of impermanence, and it's like an illusory world. So this is what Eve does. So this is a very iffy subject, but I'm going to do it. I don't care. So Eve creates a world of illusions. So one might even say lies, right? That's what illusions are. And then in order to renew, fix something, heal something, because when we're tired, it's like we're sick. This is important to understand. I don't think a lot of people make this connection, but it's obvious. It's like you're sick, you're falling asleep, it's like you're dying. So, but this sleep is done for the purpose of healing you. So this is the meaning, the real meaning of the snake that heals the snake is what I'm saying here. You get stung by a snake, and it makes you fall in order to heal you. Okay. And not to be confused with the other snake that wants to kill you. That's the thing. Always have to remember both, because it's easy to then become completely ridiculous and fall into this, anytime I get poisoned, it's good. No, it's not good sometimes. Sometimes somebody's trying to kill you. Like, that's what the story of Samson and Delilah means, right? She is not a good woman. She is the enemy. But this is why this subject is iffy and difficult, because of course she's going to pretend she's the good woman. See, you can't know easily what the difference, because if the good woman poisons you in order to heal you, that's an easy end for the enemy that pretends to be your friend in order to kill you easily, right? So Delilah she looks like a good woman, She has him sleep on her lap. You see, that's why she's doing that, because whoever wrote that story understands deeply what I'm talking about here. She's making him sleep. Now he trusts her, big mistake. She was an enemy. And then she tries to bind him. We all know the story. And then she tries to get him killed, basically captured by the enemy. So he becomes a prisoner. So you can see how this subject is very, it's not an easy one, because people today have a tendency of doing this thing where it's all or nothing. It's always all or nothing. Calm down. You can just understand some aspect, and you don't have to go nuts in that direction, You don't have to start bowing before your enemy now because you understand this idea that sometimes your enemy is good. You don't have to start hurting yourself, or all these madness. These are all due to people seeing a truth, because it's kind of an esoteric truth what I'm talking about. Because why is it esoteric? Because sleep is not a public thing. It's a private thing. It's a secret thing. It's by definition secret. You go in your dream world, nobody knows about it. It's you. It's secret. It's by definition. So the whole idea of the occult comes from this. Okay, comes from the analogies of the sleep world, which is a secret place that you go. And a lot of occult powers are perversions of this, by the way. So I don't know, maybe it's not a good idea to get into this, but I could just mention at least a lot of the occult is a perversion of sleep. So it's either taking this power of sleep, which is supposed to be for healing and renewal, and then using that energy of renewal for something else, some purpose that's not renewal, some purpose that is usually adversarial. Okay, so occult powers and sleep very related. It's the same energy, but it's used for different reasons. You see, and yeah, people who can't sleep usually, who can't rest. Like I think it was with you we talked about this, right? Vampires, if I recall. Yeah. So
Yep.
vampire is an example, someone who can't sleep, and then the occult powers of the vampire actually come from the fact that he can't sleep. And this is kind of weird what I'm saying, but the powers of sleep, instead of using them for sleep, he's using them for other purposes. Okay. So, and then for him to renew himself, he has to get that somewhere else, which is symbolized by the blood of an innocent person that doesn't know what's happening, right? And why blood, by the way? I don't know if I mentioned this last time, because blood is about renewal. Blood is the liquid of renewal. So you get injured, quite literally. Everything I say, by the way, is almost always quite literally. That's the thing. That we got to be careful when we talk about symbolism, because it can easily go into this metaphorical world of I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the literal stuff, but there's a kind of a literal that you can expand on it and then just generalize from that, right? So for example, everything I said about sleep at the individual level, you can apply it to a civilization. A civilization also sleeps. Civilization also works. So in that sense, it's not like a metaphor or the negative side of what there's a part of symbolism that's just not interesting to me. It's like just random associations, it gives symbolism a bad name, actually. You're not supposed to assign meaning to things. You're supposed to find the meaning of the thing, you see, and then understand all the implications of that. It's not the same. So if you ask me, for example, what's the meaning of a cup? I've been thinking a lot about that recently. So like the Grail, what's the Grail, And it's in a lot of stories too. So you're not supposed to impose meaning upon this object, okay, in some philosophical way. You're supposed to understand what a cup is, So what's a cup? A cup is a vessel of refreshment, something like that. It's a vessel that you use to refresh yourself. Now, if I just say that, it sounds not profound, but that's just because most people don't know what the importance is of refreshment. See? So if you think this thing called refreshment is not important, then if I say the Grail is a vessel of refreshment, then it's going to look like I'm not saying anything important, obviously, right? So this is why sometimes people go off with metaphors and stuff. I don't even know what I would want to give it an example of bad symbolism, but I don't know. I don't even know. I can't. My mind doesn't. It hates so much these kinds of this kind of symbolism that I can't even pretend to do it. So I don't know. The Grail is, well, like in Da Vinci's Code. There you go. Here, see, I didn't even have to make it up. I feel better now. So it's the Grail is represents the royal blood, the royal lineage. Okay, really? Why? Why? Because it holds the blood. Is that the reason? Because other cups that are also in ancient stories and even in the Bible don't have blood in them. So why is it that? It's not. Sorry. But it is about blood, though, because blood is a renewal, is a liquid of refreshment of renewal. So it does work. And usually it's wine, can be water. But the idea is, if you understand the concept of renewal and refreshment, then you understand what the Grail is. If you don't, you don't. So, and it's like, it's part of the symbolism I'm talking about here. So actually, if you want to understand, for example, what's the Grail, I could say, you find the Grail when you go to sleep. See, that would be more meaningful than all the crap that's being said out there. Because when you fall asleep, you get renewed. So falling asleep is the Grail. I could say that too. Okay. And this is why in the stories, when they go looking for the Grail, they always end up in exile, losing control, going back to nature, not being in control of things, and like losing their direction, not knowing what they're doing, losing even their quest to find the Grail, you see? Because that's what happens when you fall asleep. See, you think you're going on a quest for the Grail. It's like you think when you sleep, you think you're going to work. Your mind thinks with a narrative of work most of the time. I'm doing something, I'm going somewhere and specifically, right? I've got this goal, this plan that I'm working towards. That's our mind is used to thinking more like that, okay? When you fall asleep, what happens? This narrative of working gets twisted and falls apart, okay? And you lose everything your narrative usually functions on, okay? Until you completely have no more purpose and you lose completely your sense of working, that now you're in rest, okay? So now you found the Grail, and now you get renewed, and now you get back up. Now you're back again. You return to nature. This is one way to see it. Finding the Grail is returning to nature, because nature renews. That's why. Because going to nature means you stop controlling, you stop working, okay? When you're awake, you control your body. If you want to renew, what do? You let go of you lose control of your body. Your mind doesn't tell your body what to do anymore. You're going back to nature. Your body now belongs to nature when you're sleeping. We can say it like that. And then that's when the renewal happens. Now, this is a complicated subject. I won't get into that here. Why does it renew when we lose control and when we go back to nature? This is something I'm going to keep for my book. It's the answer also to why there's exile. Why sometimes people go into exile. It's the same reason. So yeah. So that's the feminine, right? The feminine is, so that was your original question. Sorry for the parentheses within parentheses within parentheses, but that's how my mind works. So yeah. So it's like the Grail. Eve, her purpose is like the Grail. Okay. It's about renewal. It's about making Adam lose control, putting him into a world of illusions, putting him into what I now call a holding pattern. Okay. So I don't know how to say better than a holding pattern. You're in a pattern of not doing anything. So either you're turning in circles or you're waiting for something. You're stuck, you're stuck in mud, something like that. Until you're renewed, and then you're let go, and then you're back to normal again. So yeah, like I was saying, it's an iffy subject, and even in the Bible. So I know that I'm right because all the stories in the Bible confirm what I'm thinking now. Now that I understand this language enough, I see clearly that all the stories in the Bible are about that. And they're often weird stories that we kind of don't like because we interpret the Bible more morally with a moral. We think there's like always a little moral conclusion to it, but it's not about that, really. Okay. That doesn't take away morality, though, but it's not that. So when we see Rebecca doing things like tricking her husband, disguising her second son into her first son in order for the second one to get the blessing, she's putting him into a world of illusion, you see? And see, when it says that Isaac was blind. Okay. Why is he blind? Because that's what happens when you fall asleep. You go blind. See, it's just an example of when you start to understand these patterns, you start to understand these stories. They're not that hard to understand. It's only they look weird because we neglect this whole side of reality, which is sleeping. We neglect it. It's like it's not important. We don't think about it. And if we did think about it, which is what I'm doing, so we would see these patterns as not weird. So in the Bible, there's a few of these holding patterns. Someone wants to do something, and he's being held. It's like there's in a distraction. It's usually written in a way where it's repeated again and again and again. It's like you want to do something. No, don't go, stay. And he stays another day. Okay, he wants to go. No, don't go, stay. This is called a holding pattern. It's a in the Bible, the most obvious holding pattern is the one I'm describing. It's in the book of Judges, near the end there. And it's the Levite, I think, and the whore, it's like his whore wife. And then he wants to go, and then the father keeps them there for many days. It's like when you don't know this, you're like, what is this talking? Why is this in this story? What is this? But now to me, I understand it now. It's not weird at all. It's something that we all go through every day when we fall asleep. Okay, it's a holding pattern. Now I looked at, like I said, hundreds of dreams. So now I'm really, really confident that this is the pattern. Like one of the parts of the dream is called the holding pattern, which what I call the holding pattern. And it's very clear when you know this, you see it. It's like you see in the dream, oh, this is the holding pattern. Okay, there you go. It looks weird, but it's not that weird. Maybe I could give you an example of what I call a holding pattern. Okay, here's an example. There's lots of, in dreams, there's lots of airport scenes, like people who are in an airport. And I never would have guessed this before I looked at a bunch of dreams, but now I know because I saw it. But it's like people are in an airport. Okay, why? The reason is that's a holding pattern when you're in an airport. Okay. And it's particularly good symbol for sleeping because, well, like what I said before, dreams are they're just a narrative of falling asleep. Okay, that's important. Just a narrative of falling asleep and waking up. But there's so many ways to express that. There's many, many ways. And sometimes I'm amazed. Like every time I get a new dream, I'm like, wow, it's like beautiful. I don't know what part of us makes these dreams, but it's it's like really smart to put all these things together to make a narrative it doesn't look coherent, but it's actually always quite coherent when you know what it's talking about. If you don't know what it's talking about, it looks random, but it's not. So in an airport, it's a good symbol of sleeping because you land on a plane, that's falling asleep. You wait at the airport, that's the holding pattern. And then you catch your next plane, that's getting back up. Okay. So that's just one example. Okay. But I just want to give an example of a holding pattern. So that's one, waiting at an airport after you landed from one plane and waiting for the next. That's a holding pattern when you're at the airport. So lots of dreams happen at airports, but that's just one of many possible. Okay. I'll give you another example, an easy one. There's lots of dreams too in jail, prison, because it's a holding pattern. Okay, so you're in prison. It's just a representation of sleeping because when you fall asleep, you're paralyzed, you're stuck in this little world of isolation. And you're stuck there until you are rehabilitated, like a prison. And you just got to stay there. That's what prison is, right? You go there, you're stuck in this little tiny little cell, this little world, which when you dream is a representation of you're stuck in your body, you're stuck in your little cell, and you're not interacting much with others. Like when you sleep, you're not interacting. You're talking to yourself mostly. Until you can just leave. Now you're rehabilitated. See, it's the same pattern. And there's lots of dreams in prison. Another example. I'm just going to give a couple of examples here. Lots of dreams are in hospitals for the same reason. Because you're in a hospital. Why? When you're in a hospital, usually it's because you're sick, which is what happens when you fall asleep. It's a kind of a sickness. It's analogous. You're weak. You're losing control of yourself. You're sick, basically. You fall asleep. Okay, that's like going into the hospital, going into the waiting room or something like that to see your doctor. Okay, you're just waiting there. And then the thing is, just the waiting is where you get healed. See, so it kind of like in prison, you're being rehabilitated by just being in prison and waiting. So same thing, like in the hospital, basically you wait. I mean, so there's lots of dreams in hospitals because again, these are good representations of what's happening during sleep. So I could give a lot of examples, but though I think that's enough for that pattern there. So I used to, when I saw this in dreams, I used to think it was totally random, you know. When I saw his dreams, like, oh, airport. And it's such a boring dream too, you know. It's like, why, what is this dream about airports? But now, after looking at a few of them, you know, I started to figure out what it meant. So these are just examples, but yeah.
Could you talk a bit about Mary as it relates to like the role of the feminine?
I'm not going to talk about Mary.
Okay.
I don't talk about Christianity. And it's not because I'm not a Christian or because I don't like Christianity. It's actually the opposite. Christianity is the highest level of it, okay? And I think we've lost the ancient worldview. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. We've lost it, okay? And it's many reasons for it, why we lost it. I mean, I don't necessarily want to go into it, but it's usually about we tried to integrate certain things that we couldn't or that we shouldn't have, such as materialism, but there's other things that we tried to integrate, thinking that we could, and when I say we, I mean Christianity, the Christian civilization. We thought we could absorb certain things and then make them our members of us, like members of, make them into things that follow the Christian principle, which is Christ, obviously. Maybe at first it looked like it was working. Kind of like if you eat a poison fruit, you might not realize right away that you're sick. Gonna take a little time, you know. Maybe an hour later you'll start feeling weird, you know. But for that hour there after you've eaten the poison fruit, maybe you think you know, you're on top of it. I just ate this poison fruit, no problem, you know. I'm still okay, no worries. Then an hour later or 2 hours later, then whoops, you know, why am I dizzy? Why am I hallucinating? You know, why am I falling asleep? Yeah, you see, it's all related. This is related to the subject in question, but yeah, because you ate something that you weren't supposed to, or you tried to integrate something into yourself that did not. Okay, now and then later you got sick, and then parts of your body were not serving Christ anymore, but we're serving something else, and they were in your body, and you thought it was the body of Christ, but it wasn't. It was something else, serving something else. Like when you eat poison, you eat something toxic, you want to make it part of your body, but it rejects. It doesn't follow you what your mind tells it to do. It follows some other weird thing that you don't know necessarily what it is. And then you lose control of your body, you know, you fall. You get crazy. Yeah, your mind, you lose it, you know, because when you eat something poisonous, you hallucinate, you know, you even if you just drink, by the way, it doesn't take much. Just drink some water with some salt in it. I'm not actually suggesting this, by the way, don't do it. But you know, drink some water, just a little bit of salt water, you'll hallucinate. I mean, it doesn't take much to make us go crazy, you know. You think you're drinking from a clean stream, but actually it's a stream that comes from salt water. And you taste it, tastes fine. It doesn't taste salty or anything like that. It looks clean. You drink it, and then 10 hours later, you're seeing things. You know, this is real. So it doesn't take that much to go crazy. So you got to be careful what you eat. You got to be careful what you integrate. Now the thing is, I think Christ can integrate everything. But that doesn't mean you have to, it's not, I don't think it's, see, that's the thing. Okay. It's not because something's possible that you can always do it now, you know. There's some things that only later you should do. And this is just, I mean, I'm saying common sense stuff here. I mean, when you build anything, you got to start with foundation. Then at the end you reach some other point of the construction. You don't. And then when you're at the construction, you can't touch the foundations anymore. You know, there's an order to things, and so that doesn't mean everything can't be integrated by Christ. But I think there mistakes were made at one point, and I think things were attempted to be integrated, and then it took a few centuries, maybe even, and then the poison that was eaten started taking over, and then this poison put itself above the other thing, and then the other thing was lost because of it. So I don't want to get too much detail here, but I'm just describing generally how I see things now. So what do we have to do? We have to go back a little. We have to do what it's Eve's job to do, I think, to fix these problems. It has to go back, you know, before we could go forward a little bit. And then this is like, for example, if you eat poison fruit, what do you do? You have to vomit. It's crude, but you get the poison out, you vomit. And now you're okay. Okay, good. It wasn't that hard, right? You just get rid of it. The longer it takes you to vomit, though, the more trouble you're going to be in, right? So now I think it's been a while. Maybe we should have vomited a while ago. We didn't. So now it's going to be hard. I don't know what else to say. Yeah. So there's lots of examples of the patterns I'm talking about in the Bible. Well, we spoke about last time, I think we spoke about one of the examples, which is Tamar, the story of Tamar. It's a clear example of what I'm talking about here. A mistake was made by Judah. He tried to marry a woman, a strange woman, foreign woman. And then, see, this is a good example, very good example, because what he tried to integrate at that time, he was not able to. But that doesn't mean later he wouldn't be able to, and he was, okay? Because this is actually interesting. The woman that Judah tried to take as his wife was called the daughter of Shua, okay? So it's Bat-Shua. And so this, he wasn't able to at that time. And because of that, Tamar had to do her world of illusion, had to put him into a world of illusion, a sleep illusion, in order to retract what he had done, okay? And then start over, okay? And this is the sleeping pattern that she did on him, okay? So she made him go in circles, come back on himself. And later, when does this happen that the daughter of Shua is integrated later? This is Bathsheba, okay? That's who she is, because I'm not making this up too. In the Bible, Bathsheba, the wife of David, she's also called Bathshua. So I think it's in the book of Chronicles. They call her, instead of Bathsheba, they call her Bathshua. It's very close, those two words, because, you know, in Hebrew well, I mean, there's a letter called Vav and there's a letter called Beth. And so Beth is V or B, sometimes V, sometimes B, depending. And then the other letter called Vav is sometimes V also, sometimes W, sometimes like a U sound, like a vowel, okay? So that's what we have here. Bathshua and Bathsheba. It's just the B that's replaced by the other letter, okay? But it's the same sound. It's the people who wrote this knew what they were doing. Okay? This is not a coincidence. So, like I said, in the book of Chronicles, Bathsheba is called Bathshua. So she's called the daughter of Shua, because they want us to understand what's going on here. They want us to understand, whoever wrote this or put those texts together, wanted us to know that Judah back then tried to integrate Bathsheba, or she was called Bathsheba, and he failed. But then only later was he able to integrate her, and she gave birth to Solomon, and it's through David. Okay, so long story. I could get into it here. Maybe one day for sure I'm going to explain all these things, but for now I think that's an interesting point. Kind of what I parallel to what I was saying before. It's not because you can't integrate something now that you can't integrate it later, and that's extremely important to understand. Uh, it's not all or nothing. Some things can happen in between and make it possible for you to integrate certain things. A certain process can happen. Things can change. You can reach a certain point in your development where now you can handle it. Now I can integrate Bathsheba. Before I couldn't. Now I can. So, by the way, since we talked about it last time, maybe I can add something to that interpretation of that Tamar story. It's one of my favorite stories because it's related to the subject I'm talking about here with Eve and everything. So in the story, she tricks him. She tricks Judah. She disguises herself as a prostitute, right? In order to trick Judah into having a child with her, basically. Okay. Yeah, that's part of the illusion world that I was talking about before. She puts him into a world of illusion. And then it says, yeah, we talked about this last time. He didn't have anything to pay, okay, for the services, the prostitution services. And so he left her his staff, his signet ring, and his cordon, it says in the story, okay? So this, by the way, is important because it's a good symbolism. It's a good representation of the concept of credit, buying by credit. It's a very important concept in the Bible. I don't think a lot of people understand all the implications of this credit thing. I wish we should, because we're in trouble now because of it, our society as a whole, because of the credit thing. If we only understood this, we could have avoided some problems that we're going to go through now. But see, he was able to buy the services on credit, right? On because he didn't have what it took to pay for it then. So, but that's part of her trick, but it doesn't matter. The situation is the same. So the idea with credit is, what are you exchanging for the services if you can't pay for it? And the answer is your identity, okay? So when you borrow on credit, when you borrow money and you pay for something on credit, you're paying with your identity, okay? Your reputation. It's a big deal. So thinking that you're getting it for free is foolish, You're not getting it for free. You're putting at stake your reputation, which is the most important thing you have. It's like your soul or something. So I'm putting as collateral my name, my identity. And here it was to sleep with a prostitute. So it's like the lowest possible thing, and that's the danger of credit. It's like a trap, You think you're getting something, but you think you're getting something, but it's not really yours. In exchange, you put your identity, it was put hostage, okay? And then until you repay the debt, you belong to the creditor, basically. You're like at a deep level. Your reputation, your identity, your soul belongs to the creditor. Okay. So, but in this case, it's good because she was an example of the good stumbling stone. She was an example of the Eve pattern that I'm describing here. She was doing it for his own good, But that's not always the case. Obviously, it's rare. It's a very rare thing. So, regarding that symbolism, I'm trying to see make myself talk about the tree of the knowledge of good and bad or not, or Okay, I'll say something else first. In that story, I mentioned this in my book too, the crimson thread. Okay, this is very interesting symbolism. It's very, let's say, powerful. There's lots of information contained in that little symbolism, the crimson thread. Um, See, in the story, it says, like I said before, she gets his staff, his signet ring, and his thread. What is that thread? So obviously, it seems important in the story because, or why would it mention this thing? We understand signet ring and staff. Not hard to understand. I mean, the signet ring is just your name, basically, right? That's what it is. You put your name. It's somebody could forge stuff with your signet ring if they have it. So it's like they have you. It's like they have your name. They can do things in your name now, and you're going to be responsible for it. So it's a big deal. And the staff represents his lineage, okay, in that story, because that's what a staff is. It's a branch of a tree. It represents your lineage. He's like Judah is a staff. Is one of the staff of Jacob, Israel. He's one of the tribes. Tribes mean staff. In Hebrew, tribes is a staff. So, because it's a branch of a tree, it's all about a tree growing. It's a lineage. So he gives her his branch, basically, his lineage. And that's literally what happens too, because then his lineage belongs to her because his kids die, and then he gets new kids out of her. It's like he gave her the lineage of Judah. It's a big deal. Okay, but what's this thread? So this is something I didn't know before, and I talked to someone recently that I just met randomly on the internet, and I asked him, "What is this thread?" You know, somebody who knows more about these traditions than me, you know, because there's some of it in the Bible is historical stuff that if you don't know, you don't know. What are you going to do? I mean, so I asked, "What is this thread?" And it's interesting what he said. He was said the thread is it's a blue thread. It's called the blue thread. Okay. And this is the thread that they put on their garments, the corners of the garments. Okay. And it's also something else that I didn't know. This is the part I didn't know before. It's like a seal. Okay. It's like a thread, a blue thread that you use as a seal to make sure something wasn't tampered with. So for example, it's kind of like a seal. A wax seal is the same thing, right? You put a wax seal on an envelope and you put your signet ring on it. It's a way to ensure that something was not tampered with, especially if it's a letter or a message or a contract or something like that, right? It wasn't tampered with. So now you know it wasn't if the seal isn't broken. So that thread is like a seal like that. It's a thread of blue that was really, really expensive because the dye was really expensive. So what you could do to make sure something wasn't tampered with is put a blue thread like that in some way where you had to break the thread in order to break the seal, exactly like a seal, you know. So we're used to that concept still because we had it in a Western culture too, you know. Every culture has this idea of a seal. So the blue thread is a seal, okay, that you put, and it's so expensive that a crook wouldn't have the means necessarily to break that seal and put it back, put another one to replace it, to like fake that it wasn't tampered with because it's too expensive. So it's like not worth it. So, I mean, it's kind of like the same thing when we print money, when the government prints money, it prints it in a way that it can't be duplicated by some amateur, maybe today who can because of technology, but in the past, you know, nobody can afford a printing press. So it's not easy for some dude in his basement to make fake money. It's printed in a very fine way. So it's kind of the same thing. I mean, you're not going to make fake money if it costs you more to make the fake money, you know, if it costs you more to buy a printing press that you will get from the fake money. So similarly here, you're not going to break this seal in order to steal something or whatever if replacing the seal costs you more, you know. So it's along those lines. But so that's what the thread is. So there's the blue thread. And then later in the story, Tamar, it says that she put a red thread around the arm of the child that was being born, okay? Because it's her children at the end that Judah has. It kind of replaces his lineage because his children died. So this thread, okay, the crimson thread is the opposite of the blue thread. This is something I didn't know before, but now I understand. So the blue thread is a seal, And the red thread represents the opposite of his seal. So what's the opposite of his seal? It's infiltration, something like that. This was tampered with. This was altered. That's what the red thread means, the opposite of a blue thread. So the blue thread tells you it hasn't been altered. It's about integrity, right? Things have remained, kept their integrity. And the red thread means, infiltration or been tampered with. So that's what it represents. That's what it represents in this story of Jericho. Joshua goes to Rahab, the prostitute, and she lets down a red thread to have them escape. See, it has the same meaning in that story too. It means infiltration. There was an infiltration right here. That's where you see the thread. Okay, it's infiltration and exfiltration. I don't think that's a word, but I mean, the thing was able to escape too. So here, usually this is bad, right? Usually infiltration is bad. Tampering is bad. These are all bad things. So that's kind of a stumbling stone theme, right? You're fallen. You've been infiltrated. You've been tampered with. You've been corrupted. But in this example, it's a good. So that's what the good stumbling stone. A good example of it is Tamar. A very simple example of it. Yeah. By the way, this is something I wanted to share. See, about the crimson thread. I've never seen anyone say this before. Maybe someone has, but I didn't catch it, so I'll say it. It's called crimson thread. Crimson is in Hebrew, okay? It's shani, okay? And it means, the word is very interesting. It comes from the word, the same word as year, okay? A year, or a cycle, okay? And it means a lot of things. This is actually a good proof. If anyone wants to prove that the patterns I describe in my book are the right ones to understand the Bible, this is a good example, because it means a year, so a cycle. It means just in general change. It means something diverse, different. It means disguise. These are all the meaning of the same word, crimson. So it means also to redo, to repeat, to do again. Okay, so it means two, like two, the second one. See, in this story, we understand all this meaning, because that's what Tamar is all about. It's like a second chance. Okay, you do the first one, it was done wrong. Well, we'll do it again. We'll erase. It's also part of going back. You go back, you revert. You revert what was done, and then you do it. You have another chance. Now you do it again. So it's all the symbolism of two, right? Do again, redoing things. So this is what happens when you sleep too. Generally, because you work all day, you get tired. Now you start to make mistakes. You're in danger of making mistakes when you're tired. If you go work outside, and I've had this experience, you're building something outside and it's getting dark, you're getting tired. Now you're going to make some mistakes. You're dumb if you keep going. You're going to make some critical mistakes, especially if you're in the woods somewhere. You don't want to make a mistake. You're getting in real trouble if you cut yourself in the woods. So if you're smart, you're going to stop. But we can see this, what happens when you fall asleep. It's the same thing. You're starting to make mistakes. You're starting to fall, and then sleep allows you a second chance. You get renewed, and then you wake up, and then you're back. You restart your day. Okay, so it's restart of the day means second chance. Okay, so these are all the meaning of crimson thread. Crimson means everything I just said here, which is a lot. I mean, there's a lot included there. So the concept of a cycle, redoing, the concept of a year, concept of change, alteration. How do you say that? I was talking about tampering. You see, something has been changed, has been altered. Usually these are all bad things, you see. I mean, you don't want that. You don't want corruption. It's called corruption. Usually it's called contamination, But in this case, good. So a good example of Eve. This is very mysterious patterns, but we have to learn them now because we're in trouble. So it's time to understand these things again. Is there something else I wanted to say? Oh yes. This pattern goes ahead to the story of David, because in the story of David, like I said, Bathsheba is Bathsheba. Okay, it represents the same, not the same. It represents. So In that story too, same thing. He sinned. David makes a sin. He's not supposed to get her there too. That Sheba, somebody else's wife. So he does a pretty big sin there, sending him to war for the purpose of getting killed. We talked about this last time, and or maybe I'm confusing with someone else. It doesn't matter. So, and then David, what happens? The first child he has with Bathsheba dies. Okay, and then the second child represents this second chance, So there's like the death and rebirth. So it's the same pattern, because in the story of Judah, that's what happens. He has some kids with Bathsheba, and they die. And then Tamar comes and flips it around, reverses the thing. And then she gets a second chance. So David represents that, the second chance, or the good alteration. And also, this is also why David is a foreigner, has a foreign lineage, because it represents the infiltration. See, the foreign infiltration into Judah through Moab is David. But it's usually, this is a bad thing. See, that's the thing. Usually it's a bad thing, but now it's a good thing. And when it's David. So David represents this very rare situation where the negative, the infiltration or the alteration or the corruption is actually good, because you were going in the wrong path anyway. See, it's like you're sick. You're sick. You got to be healed. So it's like you get bitten by a snake, and then after that you need to take the antidote, which is made from the venom of the snake. So now the venom is good because it's going to heal you. But the first, so it's like it's already to double. It's already to like two negatives. It's like two wrongs make a right. Literally, that's what it is actually. So yeah, so these things are all related to the pattern of sleep. This is what I'm interested in. This is just a good example of this pattern in the Bible. But in my book that I'm writing now, I'm going to mostly be talking about dreams, see? But it is that pattern. So I'm going to be explaining this pattern, but only talking about dreams, because all the dreams are about this pattern. And this is why many people don't recognize these patterns when they read them in the Bible, because they ignore dreams, not important. Just ignore your dreams, right? Well, that depends. If you want to understand these things, then no. So that's what I gave myself this mission. You're going to understand this thing called exile. You're going to understand this thing called death, dreams, sleep. So I think now I'm basically ready to just write my book. So that's what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing this interview. I don't like doing interviews. I mean, I've told you this too. It's not a big secret. Not a big fan of public appearance. It's not my thing. So, but I'm doing it now because I think the reason is because I feel indebted to the people who just sent me their dreams. It's like I got to repay in some way. I will with my book, but I feel like I have to, I don't know, maybe acknowledge it, acknowledge everyone who sent me their dream. It helped. I wouldn't have done it without those dreams. There's no doubt about it. So thanks. Thanks to everyone. You won't regret it. I mean, a lot of you who sent the dreams, you'll see them in the book. I'm gonna have to ask permission, I guess. That was dumb. I should have stated that at the beginning, that if you sent me your dream, you're giving me permission to use it. I forgot to do that, so I'm gonna have to ask a bunch of people if I could have permission to, because I think it's you have to have permission, or else there's something weird about it. I'm not gonna mention people's names or anything, that would be useless. But yeah, so lots of patterns in the Bible, and so I haven't decided yet in this book if am I just going to talk about dreams, or am I going to talk about dreams and then use that to interpret weird stuff in the Bible, or am I going to do two separate books, two separate, just dreams maybe, and then another book that's going to be, this is what I don't like. This other book would be kind of dependent on the other one. I don't like doing that. I really don't. Like, this book is not going to be dependent on my first book. It will help a lot if someone read my first book and reads the second one, for sure. It helps, but I'm going to write it as if I assume nobody has read my first book that's reading this second book. So so I haven't decided yet. When I start writing it, I'll see. But just by experience, I'll see, is this a good idea or not to have these two subjects in one book, or do I have to split it? I might do both. I might do two, and then also just I'll maybe publish a version that has both in it in case someone because it's useless to have. If you just want one, you just want one. I mean, I don't have to force people to read what they don't want to read, but so if someone just wants dreams and doesn't want Bible, maybe I could just do the dream part. I haven't decided yet. It'll happen when it happens, you know. Um, yeah, so that's what's that's what I'm gonna do now in the next during the winter. Hopefully the winter is not gonna be too hard this year. Last year was really hard. Uh, yeah, but I learned a lot. That's the thing. I learned a lot from last year's problems. And I learned important things like really simple things uh about the concept, by the way, that we've talked about the concept of the firstborn and the secondborn and all that stuff, that pattern there. I learned a whole lot about that because of the problems I had during the winter. Um, I don't know. Do you want me to talk about? Do you want me to?
Yeah, sure.
Because it's related. It's all related anyway. It's related to the sleep part, the sleep stuff too. Okay, so um, okay, so I guess I could say what happened to me. What happened to me is my stove stopped working, okay, or malfunctioned, okay. And then I was in big trouble, because obviously, because winter time, you don't want to not have heat. So, and it's unbelievable the problems I got from this. I tried to fix it myself. I tried all kinds of things, and eventually I just had to buy another one. So that's a big deal for me because I'm not rich. This is like using all my money, just to survive. So, I bought another one. And then all these struggles, basically, I learned something really important, and it kind of revealed to me the meaning of the whole Cain and Abel story. So I can try to explain it. It's really simple, but I think, I mean, my way of thinking is the real truths, the real powerful, deep truths are really simple. But the problem is not that we don't understand things. I've said this before, but it's that we neglect the importance of certain things. We neglect them. It's like we don't think it's meaningful. We think it's just some aspect of reality that is not important. So it's not that we don't get it or don't understand it, is that we don't pay attention to it enough and we don't put it high enough in our ideas that we use to interpret phenomena. So this is what happened. So I realized the importance of something that now I call the spare. You have to have a spare. Okay, people know this already. Everyone has a spare tire, for example. It's not a big, but they don't think about it. They don't realize the importance of it. I had to because I was suffering, in winter suffering, because I had neglected this idea of the spare. So then I started thinking about this and I understood a lot of things. So, okay, so look, let me ask you, let's say a question, like a rhetorical question almost, but so if let's say I say to you, I own two hammers. Okay, I have two hammers. So then the question is like, why do you have two hammers? Why not just one? I can't use both at the same time. That's ridiculous. So why do I have two? So then there's like basically two answers to this question, or maybe three. But one of them is, for example, they're specialized in different ways. Okay. So this one hammer is for one job. This other hammer is for a different kind of job, similar but different. So for example, let's use a real example. Let's say you have a big hammer, metal hammer that is really blunt, and it's just for the construction of the general, let's say, frame of the house. Okay, so it's just a normal hammer. And then you have maybe another kind of hammer that is a little smaller and a little different, and that's just for the finishing touches of the house. Once the house is built, um, you put in the I don't know what those are called, but what you put on on the bottom of floors, between the wall and the floor. What's that called? I don't know what that
Baseboards,
called in English. What is it?
baseboards, baseboards.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, makes
Yeah.
sense. So let's say you're putting that in with those little nails, you need maybe a different kind of hammer, let's say, to nail that in so it doesn't like wreck the whole thing. So maybe that's why you have two hammers. Example, right? You have one hammer for one type of job, the other hammer for another. Okay. So that's one explanation. Um, so this is in my book, when I say talk about Cain and Abel, okay. Um, so that's the kind of explanation I used. Okay. The explanation where it's a specialization of two things. So what I said, it's like, why do you have two sons? Why does Adam have two sons? Same question. Why do you have two hammers? Let's say similar. So the answer that I gave in my first book was a specialization of Adam. So Adam has a job. It's a big job. He needs two different specialized jobs to do it. So the way I explained it is, um, Cain is specialized in the realm of facts and earth, like the earth, concrete facts, like fighting, war, building stuff. This is like, uh, it's like a king. It's like what do you call that? Like the secular domain, basically, what they used to call it, just the concrete practicality of things. So that's Cain, let's say. And then there's the other aspect, which would be like spiritual things. So it's like Abel is focused on spiritual matters. So he's represented by kind of a priest. He's a priest. And I think that's what it is too. I wasn't wrong, that's why priests, you have a, what do you call that? Crook, right? Because it's related to the shepherd. And then Cain is more like a king because he's dealing with reality, facts, killing enemies and stuff like that, hunting and stuff like that. And the other one is leading his flock with ideas, is understanding things, spiritual knowledge. So specialization, that's why, example, you have two hammers, okay? So let's say in our example, we can compare, let's say the first hammer is like Cain, the second hammer is like Abel. So start with Cain, dug, 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 use the big hammer to build a structure. And then after that, you do the inside of the house. You're doing a nice, you need your little hammer, to not wreck everything when you build. So, okay, that's one answer. Now, but then there's another answer, and this is the one I neglected, but now I learned through suffering, the other reason you can have two hammers is because if one breaks, you have another one. I mean, it's obvious, right? I mean, so you need a spare hammer because if one breaks, you have another one. And this becomes more and more true the more and more your tool is essential to you, right? So if you're making a living with this object, you need a spare because if it breaks, you're in trouble because you can't fix it when you're using it. And that's the thing. You can't fix your hammer while you hammer, obviously, right? I mean, but this is true for everything. You can't fix your car while you're driving it. You gotta have your car at rest while it's being fixed. That's also why we sleep, by the way. You need to get paralyzed for your body to heal, to be fixed. It doesn't fix when you're doing stuff, just like you can't fix your car when you're driving. But maybe there's a certain amount of fixing that can be done while you're awake. But the deep fixing, the deep renewal, the deep healing needs to be when your body stops working. Because your body is like your vehicle, right? It's like your car in a way. When you're driving it, you can't fix it. So similarly here, you have two hammers because if one breaks, the other is going to be used while you fix the first one, maybe. Or maybe if it's totally broken, then it gets replaced by the second one. So this is another way to interpret Cain and Abel, as a spare. So Abel is a spare. But then you have to ask yourself, but then there's a lot of implications to that thing, though. That's a lot of implications. This is what I mean by you understand something, but you don't understand all the implications. So maybe someone can understand the idea of a spare in general, but they don't think about all the implications. So let's say you have two hammers, one that you use and one that you don't. Okay, but then it's like, okay, what does the life of this hammer look like? The one that's not being used. Well, I don't know. It's going to hang on the wall somewhere. In fact, I better not use it. better not use it, because if I use it, I could break it, right? I mean, the whole point of this one is to not have it broken and not have it used. I'll keep it new. I'll keep it never used. This one I'll use until it gets broken or whatever. But the other one, I'll keep it in pristine. I'll keep it pristine. I'll keep it clean, pure, not used, not broken, not anything, because his purpose is to replace the other. So you see, that's one implication of the spare is got to be kept not at work. It's at rest while the other one is at work. Okay. But then at one point there's a switch, right? Possibly if this one breaks. This one breaks it, now it's this one that has to come in and replace it. And then maybe this one's being fixed during that time. And maybe after that you can go back. It's okay. So one of them is almost like an ornament, okay? The one that's not being used. And his existence is like in the future, right? His whole reason for being is for the future, while this one is for this world right now, right? This important concepts in the Bible, this world and the world to come. The world to come just means the future. There's been a lot of misinterpretations with that. So in my example, a hammer, the one that's not being used is for the world to come, and the one that's being used is for this world. So the firstborn is this world, and the secondborn is the world to come. So, and then if something happens to this one is there to replace it. And what is this one doing during that time? Well, they see, that's what you got to think about. Of course, the analogy of the hammers gets tedious after a while. You can just understand that we're talking about two individuals here, right? We're talking about, let's say, Cain and Abel. So there's more implications than with a hammer, obviously, because Abel has to make a living for himself, even though he's not being used in this world. He has to still exist, so he has to make some kind of a living. So he becomes a shepherd. You know, you can understand that in different ways. There's lots to understand there, actually, why he's a shepherd. But so, and then you got to understand something else too. So you can combine those two interpretations, the one I said before with the specialization and the one I'm saying now with the spare. Combine those two. I think when you combine those two, you get the right image of what Cain and Abel is about, because when you combine them, you can also say this. I kind of already did. So, I mean, let's say you're building your house. You start building the exterior, and then you build the interior. So at first you're using the big hammer, okay, the one that's like Cain, let's say. And then after a while, you're done with that, and now you're at the interior. Now, what do you do now? The role switch. Now, the one that wasn't being used is going to be used, and the one that was used is not going to be used. Okay, so there's a switch. So there's a time to use this one and a time to use that one. Okay, so it's not necessarily because the hammer's broken. The first hammer, Cain, it's not necessarily because he's broken that you got to replace him. Sometimes you got to replace him because now is another function. Now you're in the inside of the house, you're going to use the other kind of hammer. So now it's time to put Cain on the wall and put Abel in the building. You know, he's going to be operating now. So I think that's how we have to understand Cain and Abel, as a combination of interpretations I gave here. So Abel represents renewal. Okay, he's like an agent of Eve. I was saying before, you know, some men are actually working for Eve. So that's kind of what Abel is. He's there for a time of renewal. So it's not necessarily, sometimes people ask, what did Cain do wrong? You know, I don't know why people are so concerned about Cain. By the way, it's funny to me. It's like, why aren't you concerned about Abel? It's like, what does he do? Like, what is he doing? He gets nothing, you know? Cain gets everything. Abel people are always concerned about Cain. Like, oh, what did Cain do wrong? What did Abel do wrong? You know, why does he not do anything? You know, while the other one's the king, let's say. So the thing is, I think the way to understand it is there's a time of renewal. So it's not necessarily that Cain did something wrong. It's that when you work the land for a certain period of time, the land goes into a famine state. Like the land stops producing. I mean, every farmer knows this, or everyone who's a gardener knows this. If you exploit the land for a certain time and you don't, you're not careful about it, the land doesn't produce anymore, or it produces fruit, but it gets sick and the fruit has trouble. It doesn't, it rots away and stuff like that. I've experienced it myself, but I mean, anyone who gardens knows these things. You should know these things. So what did Cain do wrong? Not necessarily anything. It's possible that, I think now this is how I interpret it now. He didn't do anything wrong, actually. He just exploited the land for a certain period of time, and then the land stopped producing for him because that's what happens when you exploit the land. I mean, it's just a fact of life. So then what happens? The land needs to rest, renew itself, just like we do. And then so it has to stop being exploited in that way. And that's what Abel's for. Abel, now it's time for Abel to take over. Like, you just graze with his sheep. That's a different kind of existence that doesn't require, not like Cain, doesn't require to plant seeds and get all the minerals out or whatever it is when you plant seeds. At one point, the resources are not there. So there needs to be a period of time when things are redistributed in a way. So the toxins that plants produce, at one point, there's too much in that place. And the resources needed for the plant are not there anymore. So either you go somewhere else and plant somewhere else, or you wait. And that's what the whole concept of the Jubilees and the whole concept of the sabbatical years and all that, that's what it's about. There needs to be a year of not producing. Why? For the earth to renew itself. So I think this is what's going on in the story of Cain and Abel. Cain was reaching the end of his production. Like it says too in the story, it says at the end of days, this is what happened. Now, why does it say at the end of days? Because I think it's wanted to understand it's the end of the day. Now it's the night. Okay. The end of the work period. Now it's the rest period. So now it was time for Abel to take over because his lifestyle allows for the rest to happen, the rest of the land. See, it's about the land resting, not him. And now Cain was supposed to take a secondary role. See, and I think that what his sin is, if any, is refusing that. Okay, like he refused to lose some of his power for a time of rest. Okay, he didn't want to lose his power during that time of rest. So I think when it says at one point or at the end of the days, Cain, he brought his offering to God and God rejected it. And I think the reason God rejected it is because it wasn't good anymore. The land wasn't producing. Sorry, lots of noise. It's like a rural area. There's
That's okay.
all kinds of recreational vehicles and stuff. So I forgot what it. Oh yeah, okay. So I was saying the reason why God refused his offering, now that what I understand is, I think more a better answer, is because the land had reached its production limit and now was producing bad fruit, which is what happens in real life, which is what always happens if you exploit a certain land. And then he obviously kept giving his fruit of his land, but now it wasn't good anymore. See, it's not necessarily his fault. It's just the way things are. But then he did sin because then God is like, calm down, I prefer Abel's thing now because this is the time where it's supposed to switch from work to rest for a while until the land renews itself, and then you'll be back. You'll be back on top. Don't worry about it, dude. Cain. But Cain just didn't want that. That's how I see it now. And he just wanted power, to remain power. He was afraid to lose his status as the firstborn. So he killed the other one. So that's kind of like, again, a lot of implications. I'll go back to my analogy of the two hammers. It's like now we're done with the outside construction. Now we're going to do the inside, and then it's like if the hammers had an ego, the big hammer might be like, no, I'm not. I'm the big one. I'm the good one. I'm the strong one. I'm gonna build the whole house, And then maybe the big hammer smashes and destroys the little one, the one made for the inside. And then what happens? Then the builder's forced to use the big hammer for the inside. And then he breaks a lot of stuff, See, this is what happens when you don't want to do what's right. You don't want to, stuff gets broken. So maybe the house will still get built, but it's not going to be, it's going to be broke. It's going to be some problems. So this is what happens too. But with Cain, he So it kills Abel, and the blood of Abel is what renews the land, kind of like the blood of Christ. It's the blood of Abel that it represents. That's why it says the blood went in the earth, and the earth drank the blood of Abel, or something like that, because it wants us to understand that it's the blood of Abel that's going to heal the land, okay? But it's gonna be a long process. And then it turns into the flood later, but and that's when the land is healed. Okay, that because the flood is a period of rest, really. That's what it is. And then we start creation number 2, which is after the flood, there's a new world, right? So that's day. It's like the new day that starts. Okay. But what I was going to say about Cain is that he's like the big hammer used inside the house. He tries to do the job of Abel, but he's doing it wrong. He's like something that's not meant for that. So this is what Cain does. He ends up trying to do Abel's job at the end. And that's why it says that Cain became, at the end of his lineage there, they lived in tents, right? It says Jubal and Jabal or something like that. So it's Jubilee, really. They want us to understand it's about the Jubilee. But so these guys live in tents and take care of sheep like Abel. And the other one's a musician. That's what it says. He plays the flute. Okay. So what that means is that Cain's lineage now must do the part that Abel was supposed to do, but Abel was meant for it. He would have done it correctly and well. Well, Cain is not. He's not the right tool for this job, but he has to do it. No choice. There's nobody else. So yeah, I broke my small hammer, and now I got to use the big one inside, break a lot of stuff, break the house, but I have to do it, so I do it. So that's what Cain was doing, his lineage, trying to copy Abel or do Abel's job, and it led to the end of his lineage completely. Because you're not supposed to do that. He had to at that point. So musicians, and it's like Cain living in tents, taking care of sheep and playing music. It's not his job, really. He can do it, but it's like a weaker version of it. And it's like maybe a subversive or decadent version of it. We can see it like that. While Abel would have done the job, but cleanly and nicely and without problem. Okay, so that's one way to. So I hope my analogy helped a little bit to
Yeah.
understand this. I think I said a lot here, but maybe it's a little too much. I don't know. So we'll see. I'll see how people react to it. But so it's not that complicated, you see. So, but to me, it took a long time to understand the concept of the spare, okay, and how the spare is related to rest and renewal. So you got the spare so that the other one can be fixed. While that one's fixed, you use that one. So this is, again, same thing. The sun and the moon represents that in a way, because the sun during the day is the work, represents the work time. But then it falls. At one point, everything falls. So at one point it falls, and then it goes under the earth. It's dead. It's broken. What's happening under the earth? It's being repaired. That's what's happening. So the sun, when it goes under, it falls, it loses everything, he's in exile. This is exile. That's what it represents. And then it gets healed. It goes into a holding pattern, basically. That's what the sun is doing. But while the sun is down there, then the moon is up there. So the moon is like the other hammer, it's like the moon is there now to replace the sun during this rest period. And then to give an opportunity for the sun to be renewed, and then it comes back. So that's what sleep is all about. But the thing is, with sleep, it happens before it's too late. See? Yeah, like things get fixed or maintained before they break. See, so sleep is about not really fixing things, but more something like maintenance. So kind of like a janitor, kind of like during the school, let's say you're working at school, during the school hours, everyone's working, everything gets dirty, junk on the ground, and then during the night, the janitor comes in and cleans. So it's more like that than an actual fixing and repairing or healing, because it's about. But if the janitor wasn't there, then it would accumulate, right? And then things would really break at one point, pipes would burst and, things like that. It would be a big problem. But because the janitor's there every night, he fixes the little things, he maintenance, right? That's the word for it, maintenance. So sleeping is maintenance, but it's both. So if you're sick, you're in bad health, you will sleep. Sleep is sick is related. So if you get sick, you get weak and you will sleep, and the sleep will heal you. Or the time will heal you, the time of resting. Just rest. You got to rest when you're sick. But that's not the ideal situation. That's when you got sick, when you got broken. But obviously what you want ideally is to rest even when you're not sick. That way you don't get sick, right? Sleep. It's a maintenance thing that you do every night so that you don't get sick, so that you don't get intoxication, heavy intoxication in your body, So when you sleep, there's detox going on. Things flow, because there's concentrations of toxins that you do during work that you have to be flowed out, kind of like when you sweat, some of the toxins, and when you cry, some of the toxins get out. And then when you sleep, they're not necessarily getting out, but they're being redistributed. Things are flowing around there, and things are being healed. So maintenance, yeah. So, but that's really deep, though. I don't want to reduce it to a janitor. Well, no, let's not. Let's honor the janitor instead of saying what I just said. The janitor is important, Without the janitor, nothing works. So it's important. So that's what it's about. But obviously, I'm just giving you little pieces here. I'm trying not to be too jumping from one thing to the other. It's hard, but in my book, it's going to be really, really clear. Kind of like my first book, I think was clear enough, well written.
Yeah.
So it's going to be like that. It's actually might be easier than my first book, because since I'm using dreams, like dreams are really tiny little stories. So it's a lot easier. I'm going to choose the right dreams at first to explain certain things. And then I'm going to move on to other types of dreams. And then I'm going to go concept by concept, and by the end of it, I'm hoping that anyone who reads it will be able to interpret any dream, but obviously there's special kinds of dreams that don't fit the pattern I'm looking at, because there's all kinds of dreams, but there's like other higher level dreams where you have these revelations that those don't necessarily fit that pattern, although some do, because I think some of them do, but some of them clearly don't. But normal dreams, not weird dreams, because sometimes people have visions and stuff and they think it's dreams, and it's obviously not. To me, it's obvious, but to some people, maybe they don't see the difference, but there's clearly a difference. So yeah, any dream, real dream, normal dream, be able to just know what and see it immediately. So what I'm hoping is I'm going to put the dreams at the end of the book, and I'm going to suggest for the reader to read those first and just read them, go read through them. It's not such a big deal because I try to put them in one sentence, it's not too complicated. And then just see if they understand. Because if you don't see that you don't get it at first, it's not as satisfying. Like you got to see that you don't understand. Obviously, some people maybe already do, but it's like learning a new language. It's like I show you a phrase in Chinese, but try to read it. It's like, no, I don't know. This sounds like gibberish. But then, okay, let's learn the language and then read it again. And then it's like, whoa, this is obvious. I can read this now. But I'm hoping this is the experience people will get from that book. They'll read the dreams at first and be like, "Oh, this is weird, this is just random stuff. It looks completely random." And then I'll just go through the concepts that need to be explained. And then at the end, the person will just read all the dreams again, but it's going to be like an explosion of meaning, Everyone will make sense and will be an obvious. I'm hoping that's the experience I want to give, because it's satisfying when you do that, When it's like learning a new language is very satisfying. I don't know if you ever learned another language, but it's
I've been
very
studying
satisfying.
I've been studying Latin, and I'm not very good at it, but I do start to get little insights where stuff makes sense now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've studied Latin. So yeah. So it's satisfying when you read something, you have no idea what it means, and then you learn it, and then you read it, and it's a beautiful thing. And yeah, you see different things that you usually wouldn't when you learn a new language, because there's concept that you didn't have before, or there's ways of saying things. So I'm hoping this is exactly what I want. I want people to learn this language, the language of renewal, what I call. And then uh, I'm going to use this language to explain a whole bunch of weird things in the Bible. Like almost all the weird stuff that people read and are like, what is this? What is this weird stuff? Or not necessarily that it looks weird sometimes, but it looks arbitrary. Now, there's
Hmm.
stuff that looks arbitrary. It looks like it's just describing something that happened without meaning, without deep meaning, but it's never that. In the Bible, it's always if you don't get it, it's because there's something missing in your mind, or there's something you think is not important but is, and you just have to now look at it through that lens. So the lens I'm gonna try to give, at least in this book, is basically it's like the moon, it's the lens of the moon instead of the sun. It's like if you had two lenses, you look at it with the sun lens, that's the workaday lens, which is what most people look at the world through. Then there's some things you can't understand, some patterns of reality that you can't, not just in the Bible, but in real life too. But then, so I'm trying to give the moon, look at you, the moon lens or the sleep lens. And then it's not just about understanding dreams, though. That's what's important to say here. It's about understanding certain patterns that are in dream, but also not in dreams. And then those two things together. Well, I mean, I could say here that I think one of the reasons why this book is going to be important is because now we're in the pattern of the dream. Now, the past, let's see, how many years? At least 5 years. So we know where that lands us. So we're in the we are have been put in a dream pattern. I don't know by who or by what. I don't need to know really, but at least I think people should understand what's going on. We've been put in a sleep pattern, and we are being led into sleep right now. So we're being led into, well, I don't want to give away all my information here, but because I want people to actually read my book, I don't want to just give away, because you can't, it's not true that in a verbal discussion you can give as much information as in a book. It's just not true. So I don't want people to think, oh, I already listened to his thing, No, no, no. Read the book. It's not the same, You're gonna get a lot of information here. In a book form, it's not the same. So I'm going to explain things. And at the end of the book, people should realize, I hope, that we are now being put to sleep by forces unknown, let's say. Let's leave it like that. And we're being put to sleep. Now, the question is, are we being put to sleep for good? And I mean for good, not in the sense of forever, but for good in the sense of for our own good, like when we fall asleep and wake up the next day to renew us, to refuel us, or are we just being killed like Delilah tried to kill Samson? That's the question. I'm not necessarily going to try to answer that question, obviously, now or even in my book, but we have to at least be aware that are we dealing with Tamar or with Delilah? That's what we got to figure out. Tamar, Delilah. I don't know which one either right now, honestly. I see some signs sometimes that lead me. At first, when I didn't understand this language, or when I understood a little, there was no doubt in my mind that it was Delilah. Okay, that we're being killed. We're being assassinated here. The more I understand the sleeping stuff, the language of sleeping, the patterns involved, the more I see that is what's happening. We are being put to sleep. There's no doubt anymore in my mind. But the more I'm not sure, unfortunately, the more I'm not sure if we're dealing with Delilah or Tamar. Is it for our own good to make us sleep, to renew the land, to renew ourselves, to renew our civilization? Or is it by our enemy that wants to just put us in the ground for good, Uh, I'm not sure anymore. Unfortunately, I thought by learning this language I would know more which one it was, but it did kind of did the opposite. I used to be more sure that we were dealing with enemies. Now it's like kind of in the middle. It's reaching the middle. I'm still more leaning toward enemies, but it didn't do what I thought. I thought it was going to make it more sure that we were we were being attacked, but it didn't. It brought it a little closer to the middle. I'm not sure, but anyway, I don't think it's for me to make that determination, but I hope to give enough insight or enough understanding of these patterns to know for maybe somebody else to figure it out, or maybe me later or someone else later. I don't know. It doesn't have to be me, obviously. But that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, is to answer or to help understand what's going on in the world, because I am not able to pretend that nothing's going on. I cannot do that, you know. I cannot uh keep just going on with my life. You know, I cannot do it. I cannot do it. I know something's going on. I know there's some influence that that's usually not what we're dealing with, but now it's like something changed. You know, we're being brought into um yeah, like Alice in Wonderland. You know, we're being brought into the well, by the way, Alice in Wonderland is 100% about sleeping and dreaming. I didn't used to know this because I didn't really care about that story really. It's just too weird for me, you know. Um, but now when I started to understand these patterns, the dream stuff, I started seeing, okay, this guy, Lewis Carroll, whatever, who wrote Alice in Wonderland, he was just talking about dreams and sleeping, and he understood a lot of things. And then he just wrote, instead of doing what I want to do, which is to kind of explain it, he just wrote a story, you know, like maybe he did the right thing. Maybe he's better than what I'm doing. You know, he didn't explain it. He just wrote a story with it. We'll see. We'll see. But maybe now's the time to understand it. Maybe back then it wasn't, you know, because maybe people weren't dealing with it then and it wasn't as urgent as it is now. But everything going on in that book or in those books is about sleeping and dreaming. So he was exploring that the idea of um you know, shrinking, growing, all these things are about falling asleep. Um, these obstacles, you know, she's always also the I'm late, the rabbit that's late. This is all dream patterns. Now I know. I didn't used to know before, but now I know. And the idea of looking in the mirror, there's lots of mirrors in dreams because it's related. Going into the mirror, that's just as a representation of falling asleep, because when you fall asleep, you go into yourself, right? So if you look in a mirror, and also it's related to mirror because it's an image, it's an illusion. A mirror is an illusion. It's not real. And you look in the mirror, it means you're looking at an illusion. That's what dreaming is. And it's not any kind of illusion. It's an illusion about yourself. And that's why the idea of even in the Matrix, you know, he goes into the mirror. It means really falling asleep because that's what falling asleep is. And actually, in dreams, there is that image. I've seen it a few times, going into the mirror. And also, yeah, see, if you understand that the mirror also is water, okay? I've mentioned this before, that the real mirror is water. The surface of water is the natural mirror, or the prototype of the mirror. So when you go into the mirror, it means I'm going into myself, or an illusion of myself, but it also means I'm going into the water. I'm going to be washed by the water, right? It's a flood, right? So it's deep symbolism. I'm going to talk about this water symbolism in my book. It's actually a lot deeper than I first thought. It became much deeper after thinking about dreams and things like that. But in Alice in Wonderland, I think even in the Disney version, it starts with it says, "I want to be in a world of my own," something like that. And then she looks in the water, and then she's singing a song. I don't remember exactly. I saw this a long time ago, but she says, "I want going into a world of my own," because she doesn't want to do her work. See, her schoolwork. So that's what dreams are. Going into a world of your own. See, it's your world that you're entering your world. You're entering yourself. So for sure, it'd be worth watching that movie again, the Disney movie, at least just for the imagery. You see, and she goes and she deals with games. She's dealing with cards and games and things like that. This is very much related to the symbolism of sleeping. So you go into a game, a simulation that is like a miniature, but you're shrunken. You shrink, and then you go into a world of your own, like it says in the Alice in Wonderland song. Um, And see what I can explain even that. See, maybe that could be the last thing here.
Sure.
But why does it shrink? Why you shrink why is that a representation of sleeping, shrinking? It's actually easy to understand because falling asleep is shrinking because you have some capacities. Usually, when you're awake, you have capacities, and then you lose those capacities. That means you shrink. See, and it's also about regressing back to starting over again. Is shrinking. Going back. You're starting over. You're losing your because when you fall asleep, you lose your abilities that you usually have. It's like you're regressing. You go back and you shrink into yourself. And then you go into a world of your own creation, a world of illusion where you're seeing really you're seeing the renewal process. And you're like participating inside of yourself to see the renewal process. And there's different perspectives that you can have in there. But yeah, that's something I'm gonna go into in my book. But you can be a healer, or you can also be that which is healed. Because what's going on is healing, but what I mean is there's different narratives because there's different perspective. Some dreams are about I'm the healer in the dreams, and some dreams are about I'm the patient being healed. But it's the same dream, really. You're just seeing it from different perspective inside of yourself. So there's lots of different perspectives that you can identify with while you are seeing the process of renewal. But so that's why there's many, 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 many kinds of dreams. There's different ways of representing it, but there's also different perspectives. And in really good dreams, you'll be both. You'll be the healer and the patient. Well, I mean, that's not hard to I mean, you could be okay. I'll give you a really example of a dream that's actually typical. I've received this one more than once. So the dream is just this: I look in a mirror. I'm in the bathroom. I look in the mirror, and then I have a pimple, and then I pop my pimple. That's the dream. It sounds really boring, but it's all the dream pattern is in that little tiny little dream because you're the healer, you're the patient, because you're in a dream, it's always you. Every part of the dream is you, but in some dreams, there's like a perfect symbolism where you're both. Say in some dreams you only see one side of it, in some dreams you only see the other. This is like Joseph too. Joseph has different dreams that mean the same thing. Has one dream and then another dream, but the two dreams are the same, and then he's supposed to figure out these are two perspectives of the same pattern. So same thing in dreams, but in the best dreams, like the juiciest dreams, you're both. It's like, for example, I give you a typical dream, another typical dream. I'm being chased by a guy with a knife in my dream. I'm running away. It's like a nightmare, let's say. And then I'm running away. I'm trying to close the doors, but I never close the door on time. The guy's running after me, and I'm in this labyrinth. Very important symbol of dream, by the way, labyrinth, very important. And then at one point he reaches me and he wants to stab me, and then I realize I'm not afraid, and then I take the knife and stab myself. Nothing happens. So that's actually a dream that many people have, apparently. It's a pretty good dream. Okay, so it's like there's the falling down part. You're losing control. You're losing your space. You're falling down. You're shrinking. So there's many ways to represent the shrinking thing. One of the ways is to literally be shrinking. Another way is to regress into smaller and smaller spaces. So like if you're in a house, I'm being chased by a crazy person in my house, and then I go in my room, and then I go hide under my bed. So you're shrinking. That's another way to represent the shrinking. And then in good dreams, you realize, or there's some symbolism of the idea that you are both sides of the thing. You are the attacker, and you are the one being attacked. And then in really, really good dreams, then you see all of it together. You see the enemy that takes you down, and then you see you're also the one, you're the enemy, and you're the one that's being taken down, and then you're the healer, and then you're the one being healed. And then it's like you see all of it at the same time. There's a few dreams like that, where there's like an awareness of the whole thing, because some dreams only have partial awareness and some dreams have full awareness. And the dreams that have full awareness are the ones that are really, really interesting, where you see the whole thing. And what's funny is people who have these dreams usually don't understand them. It's not like they dreamt that because they understood the deep meaning of the dream. No, it's usually not that. It's just that this particular dream had a lot of info in it, was really well designed by whoever designs dreams. I don't know. I don't really know if it's our brain or not, but uh, so yeah. So this is what in my book that I'm gonna do. I'm gonna use certain dreams to explain certain things, and then I'm gonna work my way, I'm gonna try to use at the end some dreams that have a really, really perfect representation of the whole thing. So it should be interesting.
Sounds very cool. I'm sure people would be thrilled to read it.
Yeah, well, I can't wait. Now I'm getting a little bit what's the word, antsy, but something like that. It's like and now winter's coming, so it's gonna be hard again. So I hope it goes well. I'm gonna probably use the whole winter to write it. Hopefully I don't get some weird thing again. I've
Yeah.
understood everything I needed to. Enough. No more exile for me. Tired of it. Okay. I don't know who I'm talking to here, but whoever's in charge of that exile stuff, it's enough.
Okay,
All right.
well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, this was like a last minute thing, right? I
Yeah,
just because I don't honestly, like I said, I don't like doing interviews. So
that's
no
okay.
offense to other people
No,
who asked me to do interviews and I didn't do it. This is just like a random
yeah,
random thing. He just emailed me and it just happened to be at the right moment
yeah.
where I felt like I needed to do it. So I did it. So it's no offense. It's not because other people have asked me to do interviews and I always say I don't want to do interviews
Yeah.
because it's true, but it's
Hmm.
like this. For some reason, you just exactly at the right moment sent me an email. So it just happened like that. So
Well, I'm thankful for whoever's in charge of lucky emails.
of lucky emails. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
All right.
cool. Good talking to you.
Yeah, it was fun.
Bye bye.
All right. Bye.
So, Matthew, just wanted to address and clarify one thing that was brought up in the interview. So I'm just going to ask him a question. Why don't you talk about Christianity in general?
Okay. So the reason I don't talk about Christianity is actually pretty simple, but so not everyone's going to agree with me, on that issue, but people don't have to agree with me. That's the thing, I don't have any I'm I don't have any position of any authority, so I'm nobody. So you could disagree with me and then just ignore me. That's the reality of it. So it shouldn't be a big deal that I voluntarily don't talk about Christianity. Well, I think I do need to explain why, because it can be interpreted in ways that are not what it is. So it's not out of disrespect. It's not because I don't think Christianity is true. It's actually the opposite. Okay, so why? Because I think Jesus is the incarnation or the embodiment of the highest truth, okay, that we can grasp, okay? Um, it's like as it says, it's the keystone. So it's the pinnacle stone, or even the keystone might even be a better symbol for it. So the problem is, um, let's use another analogy than the keystone, although it's correct, but just so I can explain something without it becoming too strange. But um, it's like we have a lock and a key. So a puzzle, or an enigma, a riddle, and then the solution to the riddle, or the final the way to unlock the riddle. Okay. To get past an obstacle also. It's another way to see it, because the lock is an obstacle. So I think that Christ is the key to the lock of the universe. Okay. I don't know how else to say it. I think that's the best way. So there's a riddle, but the lock itself was also embodied. Um, just like the key is an embodiment of this principle. The lock is also it was embodied in the past, this lock, so as to represent or symbolize the entire mystery of the universe. It's not the actual mystery. It's an embodiment of that mystery, a symbol of that represents the whole mystery. So this lock, I think, after a while, we neglected the lock. So it's like once you have the key, maybe you think the lock's not so important anymore because, yeah, we have the key now. Why do we need to bother about the lock, right? It's true in a sense. But after a while, I think what happened is because this key is like a, like a skeleton key, like a key that opens any lock in the end, because the lock represents all locks. The lock, so we use the key to unlock many locks. And then at one point, we kind of focused more on other locks. Okay. In the history of Christianity, like for example, we became interested in science. We became interested in all kinds of other questions. And what happened is maybe we were able to unlock some of these questions with the key that we had, but at one point, what happened is we neglected the original lock. Okay, so the lock that embodied the mystery of the universe. It was a representation of the mystery of the universe. And we kind of neglected that lock. And I think at one point we lost it. We lost the lock, not the key. We have the key. So then it's like, why don't you talk about the key that we have? Because the key that we have is infinitely more full of light or full of meaning or full of authority. It solves every problem. So this key, without the lock, it gets taken for granted. That's what I'm saying. So even though you have the key, if you don't have the lock, you don't realize what this key is capable of unlocking or answering as a riddle. You lost the riddle. It's like if we have an ancient riddle that we've been trying to solve for thousands of years, and then at one point comes a stage where we find the answer to the riddle. Okay, so that's good. Now we're all happy about that. But then later we kind of neglect the riddle and we have the answer. And then later, much later, we just have the answer and not the riddle anymore. So the answer is not worth much without the riddle. I mean, it sounds perhaps a little weird what I'm saying, but I think this is what happened. So it's kind of like in that book, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There's something similar in there. We're looking for the answer to the ultimate question of the universe and everything, and then it's like we calculate that for millions of years, and the answer is just 42. Okay, 42. That's the answer to everything. Okay. So, I mean, the people who wrote that book were, we're doing it kind of ironically, but it's interesting. The idea is interesting. We have the solution, but not the question. So what is that worth? 42. What is that solution worth? Not much, So now we got to find what was the question again? What was the question? If the answer is 42. So I think we kind of put ourselves in this kind of situation where we have the answer, we have the key, but we lost the lock. We neglected the lock, we let it rust. And maybe we even at one point kind of just threw it away. By the way, just like, or the inversion of the concept of the stone rejected by the builders became the pinnacle stone. This is kind of the opposite of that, but it's related because the stone rejected by the builder is the riddle. Okay. So there's a riddle. Keep rejecting it because you don't know how to answer it. So what do? You hide it. You put it under the rug, or you throw it away. You reject it. You don't know what to do with this thing, this stone. So the stone rejected by the builder becomes the pinnacle stone or the keystone. Now, when it's the keystone, it represents the solution. Okay, so in the symbolism of the stumbling stone, there's both symbols. There's the symbol of the riddle or the lock, and there's also the symbol of the key or the answer to the riddle. Okay, so I think what happened at one point, we forgot the importance of the lock, and we kind of stopped trying to understand it because we think we have the answer, and we do. That's the thing. That's why I'm not hostile. That's why what I'm doing is not hostile, because I think, or I'm sure actually, I have no doubt that the key that we have, which is Jesus Christ, is the solution to an ancient riddle. So this is in this sense, when I say, why don't you talk about Christianity? It's like there's nothing hostile about what I'm doing. There's nothing adversarial. In fact, it's the opposite. I could, join everyone who's questioning Christianity in an adversarial way, which is a lot of people, people asking questions of Christianity and what about this issue? What about that issue? There's contradictions in the Bible, etc. These are questions that are hostile because the people who ask them don't really want the answer. They just want to find a way to attack something with questions, which is what you can do, of course. So again, an example of a stumbling stone that's adversarial. This is an example. You ask a question in order to destroy the integrity of something, but you don't really want to know the answer. This is why, to me, debates are kind of useless, because usually a debate is somebody throwing stones at you, stumbling stones at you, but not willing to listen to the answer, or not willing to do the effort that it takes to understand the answer. So that's what I want to avoid. So what I'm doing is I'm looking for the lock, the original lock, not the lock that was cared about later, the original lock, the original riddle. Okay. And because it's lost, I think, truly lost. And this riddle, that's why a lot of what I say sounds a lot like Judaism. It does. It does sound a lot like Judaism. I've been told that, and it's true. But it's not because I'm trying to subvert Christianity or anything like that. It's the opposite. I'm looking for the lock, and the lock was written in the language of Judaism. It was written in that language. The Bible is the lock, okay? The Bible is the riddle that was supposed to be solved by the Messiah. And like I said, I think Jesus did solve the riddle, okay? But like I said, I'm just repeating myself here, but the lock has been lost. So we don't know the value of this key anymore that we have. We don't, it's like like a, like I said before, it's like saying the answer to the universe is 42. And then if you start asking questions, well, the answer is always 42. No need to ask questions anymore. Well, yeah, that's not satisfying. Okay. And it's certainly not satisfying to people who don't believe that this key is the solution. It's not satisfying at all. So if you take this key that you have for granted and you lose the lock, then it's very hard to convince others that you do have the key. Because without the lock, how can you prove that you have the key? How can you prove that this is the key that unlocks that lock? And that key might even unlock other locks. But those locks are never going to be as impressive as the original lock. The original lock is very complicated, very complex, has a bunch of pins in it. It's not just a 2-pin lock, it's a 1,000,000-pin lock. So this key unlocks the whole big lock. Okay, so the reason I don't talk about Christianity is not out of disrespect, but the opposite, out of respect, because I'm someone who's looking for that lock. So as long as I'm not able to formulate what this lock looks like, or I can't show it clearly, it's useless for me to talk about the key. That's me. I don't suggest anyone follow in my footsteps. I'm not trying to be a leader or anything like that. I'm doing something that I think needs to be done, because soon I think we're going to be faced with people that are maybe our enemy, and they do have that lock, and they're going to show it in an adversarial way to us, and we won't be able to answer because we don't know how to use the key anymore, because we've been not using it with that lock. But so what I'm trying to do, I think, is a good thing. I think I'm preparing the way for this lock. It's kind of like what Joseph was doing. There's going to be a famine. You don't know that yet. So Joseph goes into exile and he finds the solution to these dreams that he had. The dreams were a lock. The dreams were the lock, okay? And the interpretation of the dream is the key. So he had to go and get certain locks in Egypt, okay? Some riddles. And then the riddle was the riddle of the Pharaoh that saw the famine in his dream, okay? The famine's coming. We need to prepare. So Joseph shows in advance this problem before it happens. Like before the famine presents itself, and then it's too late. We don't know how to solve it. So Joseph kind of goes, finds the riddle, which is the Pharaoh's dream, and then with God's help, always, he solves this riddle using God's key. Okay, the keys always comes from God. But then what's the point of all this? Well, the point is to see it in advance. Now we know in advance that this famine is coming. A famine is a big riddle. You know, it's hard to survive that riddle. It's hard to survive that problem, that obstacle. So if you see it in advance, then what do? You prepare in advance. You train for it in advance before the riddle is posed to you, and you have to deal with it now. So better to see the riddle before it's time to deal with it. And this is related to the symbolism of sleeping. Okay, so sleeping is a training. When you sleep, you're training for a riddle. Okay, that you couldn't solve if you had it in real life, but you're doing it in a tiny little dream setting, in the safety of your own body. You know, it's like a miniature version of it. You're seeing it before it happens. Okay, so then what's the advantage of that? Well, Joseph can say, while we're in a time of plenty, which is clearly almost over for us now. I mean, if we just look at what's happening in the world, we have to make a spare of everything. Okay, so that's what Joseph does in Egypt. He says, so during the 7 years of plenty, you gather enough food or enough grain to last for the 7 years that are coming. Okay, so this grain, this doublet that he's doing for 7 years, he's doubling everything, keeping one for the future, one for now. And then this doubling is the solution to when it actually happens, right? So this is an important symbol. It happens in the desert when they're only eating manna. Okay, God says don't accumulate during the week, but at the end of the week you gather double portion of manna, and this one won't rot because it's reserved for the future. So this double portion again is to allow for the Sabbath to happen, and you have a solution to that problem of resting, because when you rest, you don't produce, you don't have food. So it's similar to that. So what I'm trying to do is go and get the riddle that we lost, that we neglected, show it before it's too late, show it before it's time to answer these riddles. So why am I not talking about Christianity? Like I said, because if I talk about it now before I even myself understand the riddle, it's just going to look like everyone else is attacking Christianity. You know, it's just going to look like I'm questioning everything, questioning Christianity. But I'm not really. I'm finding the question. I'm trying to find the original question that Christ answers. That's what I'm doing. So that's the answer to why I don't talk about Christianity. It's the opposite of thinking that Christianity is wrong. It's thinking that we took it for granted, basically. And because of it, we didn't practice, we didn't practice unlocking the original lock, then we lost it. So the lock that I'm looking for is very complex. And it's part of it is not our fault, why we lost the lock, because when Christ was rejected, in his time, he was rejected, right, by his people. So what happened is he became the key to another problem, which is the nations, the problems of the nations. So Jesus became the solution to the problems of the nations. Um, and for us who are not Jewish, let's say, it doesn't matter if this key unlocks problems that are not ours. Okay. So there's a bunch of laws in the Bible that are only for Israelites, not for everyone else. So if we're not Jewish or if we're not Israelites, we don't need to worry about these riddles. They're not for us. It's not my problem what it means. Let's say I can find any law in the Bible. They're very obscure. These laws are obscure and they're, to us at least, they look random, they look weird because they're locks. But we don't need to care about those laws. See, that's the thing, because those laws weren't meant for the nations. They were meant for Israelites. So we just ignore those laws. Who cares what they mean? It's fine. We did nothing wrong on our part as non-Israelites. We did nothing wrong. These laws are not our problem. Some of them are, but most of them aren't. So eating kosher, for example, that's Jews were given this law: eat kosher. You can eat this, not that. Okay. Jesus said none of the laws are going to be lost. Not one iota of the law will be abandoned. Okay. He was talking to them when he said that. That's the answer to that problem. The moment that Christ was rejected is the moment he became the key to other problems. Okay, ours, not theirs. So you don't want this solution? You don't want this key? Okay. Sorry. I mean, you decide. I can't force you to use this key. So now this key becomes the key to other problems. Okay, so the problems of the nations. So we don't need to understand those laws. We don't. Okay. And some of the things that we do as Christians seems like paradox if you read the Bible. But only if you interpret it with forgetting what I just said here, is that those laws weren't meant for us. Well, it's not our problem. So you don't need to be kosher. You don't need to be circumcised. All these things that Paul said, and some of it Peter too. We can do that. We can follow Paul. You see, it's a paradox. It's a big paradox, It's not that easy to circumvent. It's not that easy. It's possible, I think. But for us, we can follow Paul. But can Jews follow Paul? The Jews that received the law that said, you must eat kosher. And that also said, if anyone tells you not to eat kosher, reject them. No, the answer is no. Okay. Not a lot of people talk about this subject, but I will. Apparently, I have to. So, but they can follow Jesus, though. See, that's the thing. They can't follow Jesus because Jesus was the key to that puzzle. Okay, Paul came along to help us use that key for our puzzles. When I say us, I mean the nations. And he did a good job too. Paul is very brilliant, but for him, it was probably a struggle. I mean, I don't know. I can't talk to him, unfortunately, but I mean, it was a struggle for him because he saw himself as Jewish. So all of a sudden, you got to abandon these laws. But it says clearly in the law that you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to abandon these laws, but he did. So it was to me, I think it was a struggle for Peter. Peter receives the vision of the cloth that descends, and God says, "Eat from this food," and it's all kind of unkosher food in there. So it's pigs, and eat the pig. It's like, but God, 2 seconds ago, you just told me never to eat pig, and you said anyone who contradicts this is you got to reject. But now you're telling me eat the pig. How's that possible? And the answer is what I said. The answer is now, as the moment Jesus was rejected, is the moment it became for non-Jews. And these contradictions aren't contradictions. They're only contradictions if you ignore what I just said. So part of what I'm trying to do is to see Jesus as the key to the original lock. which is the Bible, all of it, all the laws. So Paul was so conflicted with this idea that he had to abandon his identity as he's a Benjaminite. That's why it happened to him too, because Benjamin is a special tribe, you know. It was such a conflict for him that he basically went blind and crazy, you know, a little bit, because, you know, he went blind. What he saw was so high. It was higher than what he could handle. So he saw a light so bright that he fell off his horse. So that's usually not a good thing. If you fall off your horse like that blinded, it doesn't mean you understood something. It means you didn't. It means you saw something too big for you and you fell. It's a falling story. He fell. Okay. But it's seen positively for us because we are benefit from his fall. You see, these are big. I'm talking about big riddles here. Okay. I think I have to do it. But so Paul, it was such an intense paradox for him that he basically saw himself as a clown. Like, I'm a fool. I'm a fool for Christ. You know, if I praise myself, it'll be because of my sin. He says things like that, you know. Though a clown is someone who, or a jester is someone who is not trying to make laws fit with facts. Okay. If you want the definition of a clown is someone who accepts the idea that things don't fit. And he makes that into a positive narrative. Okay. Because a clown, like a clown with his big shoes, you know, why are you wearing big shoes? They're too big for you. Yeah, that's the whole point of a clown. He saw something that was too big for something too small, or it can be the other way around. It doesn't matter. But then instead of being negatively stressed about it, he saw it as a positive thing. Okay. He solved the riddle as a clown. And he says so himself. So it's not me insulting him. And this is part of the symbolism of Benjamin. By the way, I mean, this is important stuff here. I don't know why nobody's talking about these things, but Benjamin receives one name from his mother and one name from his father. So he's got two identities. So his mother calls him Ben Oni, which is like son of my pain. When she has him, she dies. So it's a big deal. So it's like almost a curse that she's giving her son, you know, you're a son of pain and suffering, you know. And then his father says, no, I'm going to call you Benjamin, which means son of my right hand. So Benjamin has two names, two conflicting names, two opposite names. Okay. So this is part of the nature of Benjamin. This is why Paul was a Benjaminite. I mean, God chooses people who fit the bill, you know, when he has certain missions to do. And this is Paul, you know, he was an enemy of Christ at first. So this is Ben, son of my pain for us. And then he flipped. He fell off the horse. This is a story of a fall. It's like he ate from the tree of knowledge of good and bad. That's what it means. He saw something too big for him to handle as he was at that time. It made him fall and become blind. So that's his second name. He received his second name, son of my right hand. So it's like he has two conflicting identities. And how does he deal with it? Well, we know from his letters. He calls himself a fool. You know, a fool is someone who contradicts himself and sees it as good. It's a good because he understood a deep mystery. We don't necessarily need to understand what he understood. At this point, anyway, our whole history is based on Paul. You know, Paul wrote almost more stuff in the New Testament than anyone else. So we can't ignore him. And we shouldn't ignore him. We don't need to ignore him. So now the question is, how can Jews be Christian? See, that's another issue because they did receive those laws. So do they all become fools like Paul? I don't think so. Maybe that Paul had a specific role to play. Clearly he did. He became the apostle of the nations. So he tailored his vision, you know, to the nations. So it's a big problem. We're faced with a big problem. Not we. See, that's the thing. Well, this is what happened to me at one point. I asked myself about Jews, why aren't they Christian? That's what question I asked myself a long time ago. And unfortunately for me, I'm meticulous, I don't accept answers that cover something just to cover it, I need the real answer. So I learned Hebrew, did all these things, learned all these things. I'm still learning, I decided to talk to Jews at one point, what do they have to say about it? No, I discovered a lot of things about the problem. Some of them are dealing with this problem in slow motion. So that's what I'm doing. I think what I'm doing is a benefit to Christians for the reason I said before, because we need to see the riddle before it's presented to us in a adversarial manner. So that's the reason I don't talk about Christianity. It's not out of disrespect. It's the opposite. So if I ever find a way to explain the lock clearly, I'm doing it slowly, it's not all in one shot. Then I'll use the key to unlock it. I'm confident that the key unlocks it. I already know the key unlocks it. That doesn't mean I can explain it, But sometimes you can understand something for yourself. That doesn't mean you can explain it to everyone else. That's obvious. I mean, in any other domain, we understand this. In any other field of study, we understand this. If you study like I did mathematics, I can understand something, but I'm not going to be able to explain it to someone who hasn't studied mathematics. How am I going to do that? I could pretend I could do the thing. I can go through the motion of explaining it to someone who's never had any experience in higher mathematics. I know already he's not going to understand. It's useless. So it's an insult, actually, to do that to the person. It's an insult to the person hearing it. It's like, why am I talking to you about something you never studied before? Insulting. Okay. So you don't do that. So what do? Instead, you try to explain it gradually and slowly, and until you're able to explain it to anyone who wants to hear it. And then once you've done that, you hope they read what you wrote or whatever, they looked at the lessons that you presented to explain these things. And then after that, you give the solution. There you go. So to give the solution to a question that we don't know what it is dumb for me. But it's not the problem of all Christians. I don't expect every Christian to be like me. I hope not. Actually, don't follow me, It's just I put myself in this situation a long time ago. And now I can't get out of it. I'm stuck. Okay. It's okay. I mean, I'm not suffering or that much. I'm suffering sometimes, but I don't think anyone should follow me, into the pit. But I'm not trying to be a leader or anything like that. I'm doing something very specific, but now I'm explaining what it is so people know. I'm trying to find the lock. This lock, by the way, is the Grail. Hey, this is the Grail. It's the question, the original question that killed Jesus, and the blood flowed into that question. But what we want now is not for that question to kill Jesus again. Why do that? Because, well, when I say kill Jesus in this context, I mean attack Christianity. So it already happened once in the past that Jesus was attacked, the Messiah was attacked by these questions. There's no reason to do that again. It's not, I mean, we kind of lost the Grail at one point, but we don't need to use that occasion to attack Christianity against. A lot of people are doing it. I'm not want to add myself to everyone who's attacking Christianity right now, which is like everyone, So I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing. I hope it makes sense what I'm saying. It doesn't sound completely insane. It's not. So I'm gonna keep working what I'm working. There's things that I have to explain. So now I'm trying to explain the Grail, which is sleep, which is rest, renewal, the stone that was rejected by the builders, the stone that Moses hit with his staff. God says, ask the stone for water. Moses is impatient. He hits the stone with his staff, and he still gets water, but it's not in a good way. And because of it, he's refused to go into the promised land. So you got to be careful with that stuff, You don't hit the stone that renews you. You don't hit it, especially when God says what to do, which is ask the stone for water. If you don't need water, you don't have to ask the stone for water. If you do, you ask, but you don't hit it. So this is what happened to Jesus, He was hit with the staff of Moses, and he still renewed, still did the job that the stone does, but not in a good way, in a negative way. It's the same thing with Cain and Abel. Abel was supposed to renew things for Cain, but Cain decided instead to hit him with his lance, his weapon, and he bled out, and his blood renewed the land still. Well, see, that's the thing. It happens still. Jesus still renewed, but in a negative way that leads to some tribulations and some exile for the people who did hit him. So I hope that explains why I don't talk about Christianity. It's a respect, it's out of respect because I already know the key is the key. I already know. I don't need to prove. We do need to prove that this is the key to the lock, but without the lock, you can't do that. So what happens when you don't have the original lock is it sometimes becomes superficial, because it's like, yeah, Jesus has answered everything. Oh, let's read this story in the Old Testament. And then it's like, let's say, read the story of Samson. Okay, well, this is just a prototype of Christ, or I don't remember the word that's used. Usually it's not prototype, it's something else. Do you know the word? People use to say that it's something that happened before Christ, but it was like I don't know the word. Can you help
I think
me? Do
I'm
you know?
blanking on it too. Are you thinking like type in like
Yeah,
typology?
typology, it's pre-type or something like that. I don't, sometimes my English is not so great, but it's, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So, but sometimes it's too superficial, you can't always just do that. It's not false though, but, oh, this is the type of Christ. So Samson is a type of Christ. Okay. Please explain to me. Okay, because he died, or because I agree that it is. That's what I'm saying. I'm not attacking. See, now I'm talking about Christianity. It already sounds like I'm attacking it. I'm not. But the answer is a lot deeper than people think. That's what I'm saying. Okay. Christ is the key to all the problems in the Bible, to all the laws, and to everything. But it's the answer is a lot more powerful and deeper than people think when they explain certain things a little bit superficially. So the reason I don't speak about it is because, like I said, I don't want to sound like I'm attacking Christianity, because that's not what I'm doing. And I'm not even attacking Christians. Because, like I said, a lot of the um the riddle, the original riddle, okay, it's not our problem, because we're not Jewish. We don't need to know these things. We don't need to make sense of the laws, because they're not for us. So a lot of it we don't need to. But I think we're reaching a point in history now where we are going to have to answer these questions. So like I said, before that happens, I'm trying to show like a dream, a dream that's a premonition, a dream that's the dream is showing you the problem before it happens, so you know what to do when it happens, like Joseph. So that's what I'm doing. I hope that makes sense. Everything I just said probably sounds crazy, but
No, it makes a lot of sense.
it does. Okay,
Yeah.
you make me feel better. Okay, because there's lots of things I don't talk about, because I know it's not going to be helpful. You don't talk about things that aren't helpful. I think this now I have to talk about this stuff. So I am, but Did you say it makes sense? I'm glad.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's quite beautiful, actually.
Okay, thank you. So that was the answer to that. I hope I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I go too fast, I go too slow, whatever I'm looking for. I know already. That's the thing, because there's different levels of understanding, you can have a glimpse of things. That doesn't mean you can explain it. Like I said before, I had a long, long times ago, I had some insights when I was 20, I had mega insights about, let's say, like a vision. I don't like that word, but that's what it was basically. It took me 20 years to understand some of it. Most of it took me this long. So I could have just back then gone crazy, start talking about my vision, like a lot of people do, by the way. And then it's just confusion and craziness. But that doesn't mean that the person who got the vision doesn't get it. He probably does. But when he tries to express it, because sometimes it's not time yet to talk about certain things. It's not time. Just like, why didn't Christ appear right after the fall? I would have solved a lot of problems, right? I mean, there's the fall. Why didn't God just send Jesus right away? Oh, problem solved. We see, because these things happen in their time, because the problem of the fall had to express itself fully before the solution to it made any sense. And in the Bible, in Genesis, the culmination of this problem is actually the fallen angels, the giants, the Nephilim. That's like the culmination of the problem of the fall. At the end there, it's like these guys, these giants, which are unions of angels and humans, hybrids, they created all kinds of problems in the world. And these problems had to be solved, and they were solved by Jesus, okay? Later, when it was time, not before. So that's the thing. I'm doing something like that, You don't say things before it's time. It's just common sense, really, I'm not that weird. I think I'm doing normal things. I think other people are not doing the right thing, actually, Sometimes some people who occultists are an example of that. They talk about things that they know when it's not time. Why? I don't know. Because whatever reason, it doesn't matter what the reason is, really. I shouldn't even need to think about that. But some occultists have more knowledge than some Christians, okay? But that doesn't mean it's better. It's like buying something on credit, You borrow money. I borrow money to buy this big mansion, let's say, okay? The $1 million mansion. I borrow all the money and I buy this $1 million mansion. Am I better than the guy who owns a little house there? $100,000 house, in a rural area. Am I better than him because I have a gigantic mansion? No, because I borrowed for it. It's worthless. It's worse than nothing. It'd be better if you had nothing than this house that you borrowed with millions of dollars. It's not really yours. So occultism is like that. It's like you have a power that is not yours, that was lent to you by an entity that you don't really know. This is what happens when you borrow money too. This money or this power is being able to be used by you, but you don't know all the implications because, like I said in our previous discussion, the one who lent you the money owns your soul right now. He owns your identity, your soul. So you might think you're using this power that looks like it's more, the guy who bought a $100,000 house with his own money owns more than me that borrowed all this money to buy the mansion. So this is how you understand some of the occultism. The occultism is like the guy who borrowed $10 million and bought a mansion. And it looks like he sometimes has more than the other one, but he has much, much less. In fact, he has millions of dollars of debt, which is worse than it's worse than having nothing, actually. A beggar is better than this guy, So it's just an example of things happen in their time, Maybe the guy can get the mansion, but in its time. He's trying to get it before it's time. He has to borrow money from an unknown entity that might be adversarial to him. And the moment there's a problem, he gets crushed by this entity, this lender of power, this lender. So I think that's an important lesson to learn here. So everything in its time. God, God is someone who works slowly, you know. All the Bible is about that. Really, it's kind of annoying actually when you read the Bible. It's mostly about it's not time yet. It's not time yet. It's not time yet. You want to do something? God's like, no, not now, later. Tower of Babel is an example of that, you know, trying to build this empire. It's not time yet. That's why it's wrong. It's not wrong to build the tower. It's wrong because it's not time yet. So it gets swept away, and then Abraham's life is all of Abraham's life is about that. You know, God promises something, and it's like, am I going to get what you promised? No, not yet, not yet, not yet, not yet. And eventually, God, you know, he makes him fall asleep to reveal this, and it's like, yeah, you're going to get it, but 400 years from now, crushing. That's a crushing blow, you know, to your plans. You know, I told you this, I promised you this, but it's going to be in 400 years. And even then, lots of struggle in between. So, you know, God functions like that. We just have to accept it. And that's my way of thinking now, you know. So I hope this helps some people somewhere, someone somewhere to understand something more. So,
I'm sure it will.
okay. So, yeah. Thanks for letting me
Okay.
explain myself on this.
No, thank you for
Because you asked me about Mary in what our previous talk, and I said I wasn't going to talk, and I felt like maybe it sounds like I'm, you know, attacking Christianity or something, you know, because then I say I don't want to talk about Mary, but then I talk about things that sound like Judaism, you know, and it is. So it's like, are you a Jew? You know, is that what you are? You know, no, it's not. It's not. So I think I had to explain myself. I hope it makes sense.
yeah, it does. It's very profound actually.
Good.
So
Thanks.
I really appreciate you wanting to talk more about that.
Yeah. Well, there's going to be more, you know, when it's time for me. I'm going to talk about these questions. I'm sure they'll annoy some people, you know, but that's everything anyone does always annoys people. So there's not
Yes.
much you can do about that. So I'm just going to do what I think I have to do. Maybe in a couple of years, it'll be a little more obvious what I'm trying to do. But for now, I'm doing this book. So book about dreams. That's what I'm doing. So
Okay, well,
hopefully by the end of the winter, I should have that finished that. I hope.
very cool. Is there anything else you wanted to mention?
No, I think I'm done now for a
Okay.
while,
Okay.
probably.
Awesome. Well, it was great talking to you again,
Yeah,
Matthew.
same here.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.